Game of Thrones Revolution. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 76 by Lynn. 3. While waiting for Jon to recover from his shock and catch up, Ghost's golden eyes changed. First they turned purple, then black, purple and gold, and finally fixed on black. At that moment, Sig took over its body, letting the wolf soul wail in the grey sea of consciousness. The sound of boots rubbing against the floor was particularly harsh in the darkness, especially for canine ears. Sig really wanted to curse. The smell of dirt and dust was getting farther away. The ominous sound came from upstairs, from the direction of the bear's room. Jon was still there, shaking his head, looking unbelievable. It growled at him, and then ran upstairs regardless of his reaction. Wolves have extremely sharp senses, and Sig enjoyed this benefit. Its steps were light and silent, and the corners and shadows in the dark would not affect its speed. If it were still a human body, it would not be able to distinguish the exact source of the sound, and would have to stop at every corner and hesitate in front of every shadow. For a wolf, hesitation and wandering are unnecessary. Sig walked in front, silently clearing the way for Jon. He came here because he noticed the change. Black mist was swarming around the tower. He searched for the source of the dragging sound in the core of the black mist. Corn. 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 The crows cried harshly and panicked. The crows here are not ordinary blackbirds. Every crow's magic power, the only difference is the amount of magic power. There are many rooms upstairs. Since it is Ghost's brain, it is not good at remembering the purpose of human buildings. He only knows that there's the smell of books, the smell of bears, and unusual smells in the room. Who is it? Jon was stupid to expose himself. It crawled on the floor and slowly approached, hoping to let Jon cover it so that it could launch a sneak attack. A shadow in the shadow, a human figure with a black body, wearing a cloak and a hood. It slid towards the bear in a strange posture. Sig recognized the smell of the bear and knew that he was still alive. Under the hood, the cold blue was like sunlight on the water, shaking unsteadily. It leapt into the air, opened its mouth and pounced on the shadow. It was sure that it had bitten something, but no one screamed or wailed. The opponent was very strong, and even with the advantage of sneak attack, it was still forced to roll on the floor. Chairs broke, desks fell, and piles of papers and books rolled down. Crows flew around in the air, while shouting corn. 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 Jon's movements were slow. After waiting for a long time without his help, Sig decided to change tactics, otherwise Lynn would die here. It followed the direction of the roll and released its mouth. With the power of rolling, it returned to a favorable position, picked the curtain and pulled it down with force. Moonlight poured into the room. A pair of black hands floated in the air, and the swollen fingers kept squirming. Sig used the force to jump to the side to avoid the black hand, but unexpectedly the black shadow pressed up, and it was pressed under it with a muffled groan. The black shadow was very heavy, and it struggled hard. Huh. Jon finally made a move. The sword pierced flesh and broke bones. The shadow didn't scream, but his breath was like ice. It finally got free and quickly crawled to the side, bending with its tongue hanging out. Even the direwolf's body could not withstand such an intense fight. If Violet saw the miserable state now, she would definitely laugh. The moonlight bleached the shadow, illuminating the pale face under the hood. Jon rushed at the undead and slashed at its nose with his sword. He hit it, and a deep gash appeared below the blue eyes, running through the entire cheek. Other. Jon screamed in pain. Bless you, gods, you should be dead. He kept backing away. Finally, he fell. A broken arm pulled him down and climbed on him like a living thing. Jon screamed and pried the broken arm off with the tip of his sword and threw it aside. The body stumbled forward, and the broken arm struggled to open and close. Sig thought with the brain of Lynn, but the speed was very slow. The wolf's brain has been specially strengthened by sports. It can make correct judgments immediately about things related to combat and action without thinking. On the contrary, the operation of the wolf's brain is crazy about logical and abstract things. The result of hard thinking is white. Don't come over. Jon screamed like a woman. The white staggered towards him. It didn't bleed a drop. Although it lost an arm and its face was split in half, it didn't care at all. Jon raised his sword above his head. Don't come over. He shouted hysterically. Corn. 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 The crows joined the screaming. The dark arm climbed up Jon's clothes strangely, as if trying to get in through the gap in the clothes. Sig showed his wolf claws and quickly swung the black and disgusting arm off Jon's body. Even for Byling's taste, the white's arm is not delicious. It opened its mouth and bit the limbs that were moved too much. The sound of bones breaking was particularly creepy in the silent night. Jon swung his sword and chopped it down hard, but the white was still able to move. It rushed forward quickly and knocked Jon down. His sword flew aside, and the white pressed on him, with its black hand reaching into his mouth. Sig was also stunned. This creature was simply a piece of rotten meat that existed to scare people. Except for the pair of eyes covered with strange frost, the rest of it was so ugly and disgusting. Jon tried to bite, kick, and even scratch it with his nails, but he was much weaker than the white, and his futile struggle was useless. Sig took a deep breath and realized that in order to get rid of this guy, there were some things he had to do no matter how reluctant he was. Just as he prepared himself mentally, he had already flown out. The target was the white's abdomen. The wolf's fangs penetrated the tough corpse skin, cut the tendons and muscles, and tore the skin and flesh of the abdomen, exposing the internal organs. Not knowing the white's weakness, he could only rely on the wolf's instinct to drag out the internal organs and bite them off. It knew for the first time that wolves could vomit. With great perseverance, he stopped Bylin from vomiting and drove the white wolf to continue fighting. There was another noise behind him. It was the smell of the bear man, who was very weak and seemed not to have woken up. Burn. 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 The crows were screaming there again. The flames suddenly exploded into a ball of heat and approached him. Ghost. Hearing Jon's shout, it jumped away from the white. Black liquid was left on the white, and the bitter taste made Ghost's body twitch. Jon held a ball of fire in his hand. He threw the fire at the white. Please, burn it. Jon was about to cry. The white was like a bundle of dry firewood, and it immediately caught fire when it encountered the flames. The fire was raging. The heat wave forced the two men and the wolf to retreat continuously. Black mist was steaming in a corner of the room. It was a long sword. The scabbard had been burned, revealing the icy sword with complex patterns, and the flames were licking the hilt. Sigurd understood that this was the core of the black mist he was looking for, the source of the change. He jumped up with all his strength, risking his fur being scorched, and jumped into the fire that was as hot as purgatory. Ghost. Come back quickly. Jon shouted from the periphery of the fire. The wolf's eyes were stinging, tears were streaming, and the sensitive nose was smoked and became useless. Even the wolf's claws softened due to the high heat. Time is running out. He ignored the astonishing high temperature and pounced on Valyria's steel sword. When the wolf's fangs bit the hilt of the sword, it was so hot that it almost melted. He said sorry to Ghost in his heart, and commanded the white wolf to break the glass and rush out of the window. The moment he left the window with the sword, the blackness dissipated, and Sigurd returned to his body. Longclaw is the name of the sword. He found the place of the sword in the memory of the world. Longclaw will advance history with Jon Snow. Without this sword, Jon will not be able to survive the continuous high-intensity battles. Sigurd closed his eyes and recalled the sword flashing with a strange cold light and the flames. He was calculating when he could ignore the abnormality and let the influence he brought really play a role. Now is not the time. We must see the future led by him clearly. Until then, we must be patient. Chapter 77 Chaos and Countermeasures. The King's Lair is leading a large army to gather in the river region. Theon unfolded the letter and tried to summarize the content of the letter after reading it. Lord Edmar of Riverrun has sent people to Casterly Rock to protest to Lord Tywin and demand an explanation. Humph. What other intentions can there be? The army has assembled and will attack. Robb shook his head. Theon continued to browse the contents of the letter and picked out a few points he thought were important. Lord Edmar ordered Vance and Piper to guard the pass of the Golden Tooth. He swore to your mother that he would never give up an inch of the Tully family's land. If the Lannisters dare to launch an attack, he will make the Golden Lion suffer. My uncle sent people and swore. This is good news, but he is not the Duke of Riverrun. What about my grandfather? Robb held his chin with both hands. Theon privately admitted that Robb was becoming more and more like a Castellan. Originally, the two were brothers who could play and joke with each other, but recently they could no longer do that. He was even a little afraid of the strange Robb. He carefully browsed the letter and quickly searched for the content about Lord Hoster. Unfortunately, there was no mention of it in the letter. There was a piece of news that made him narrow his eyes. But my lady reminds you that your uncle is definitely not good at fighting. If Lord Hoster was not seriously ill, he would never let his brother take charge of the defense of Riverrun. Theon browsed the letter again. Yes, she is very worried about the development of the situation. It seems, she is not optimistic that Riverrun can withstand the Lannister army. Robb seemed to be in a heavy mood with his heavy breathing, but this level of emotional expression was soon gone. He sighed in his heart. The difference in status between him and Robb was huge, and now there was a difference in ability. Could they really fight side by side in the future? He had always envied the relationship between King Robert and Duke Stark, and thought that he and Robb were the same. They were brothers of different surnames and knew each other for life and death. But recently he was unable to do so. Could he really catch up with Robb? Theon gradually lost confidence. Also, the lady admitted in a letter that she had lost confidence in the Vale of Orand. Lady Laisa was too worried about her son's safety and was unwilling to send troops to help. He sighed after reading this. Originally, the Vale of Orand had high hopes for its military strength. After all, the area was easy to defend but difficult to attack. They could mobilize a large force for attack without having to consider too many defensive issues. Lady Laisa was too stupid. Now the combined strength of Riverrun, the area and Winterfell far exceeded that of Casterly Rock. It could be said that she had the advantage. What was the point of her defending like this? When the other two were defeated one by one, how could Vale of Orand be saved? And Laisa is really. Robb covered his face with his hands and shook his head tiredly. Duke Oberyn really died at the wrong time. If he was still here, how could Casterly Rock be so arrogant and domineering? I hope Auntie can change her mind. Theon was speechless. His personal opinion was different from Robb's. The real mistake was made by Lady Stark. She arrested the little devil without authorization and angered the Lannisters. It was obvious that the order was not issued by Lord Ned. If the Prime Minister really wanted to harm the Lannisters, his layout would be more macro and more appropriate. Almost everything that followed could be traced back to the lady's arrest of the little devil, so that what happened in King's Landing, Lord Stark lost the captain of the guard and the most elite guards, and then the Lannisters sent troops to wreak havoc in the Seven Kingdoms, which led to the Duke sending half of his guards to hunt down the mountain. Theon had already raised objections. Lord Ned's move greatly weakened the strength of Winter City and King's Landing. If the Lannisters wanted to deal with them, they could completely ignore the Winter City base in the north and go directly to deal with Lord Ned. Unfortunately, his good advice was not adopted. Robb emphasized that King Robert trusted Lord Ned very much, and as long as the king was healthy, Lord Ned's position would be as stable as a rock. Recalling the discussion a month ago, Theon's mouth was full of bitterness. King Robert died in an accident, and it took only 2 days for the news of Lord Ned's arrest. Then, bad news kept coming. Now seeing Master Luwin coming with the crows, everyone prayed to the gods as if they were sick. The power of Winter City was completely eradicated in King's Landing, and many acquaintances were in danger of death. It is difficult to get news from King's Landing now, but from the time when the king died to the arrest of Lord Ned, detailed intelligence was constantly confirmed. The death of the king was not that difficult to accept, although in his memory, King Robert was as strong as a bear. With the impression he gave, he should have no problem living for another 30 years. His death was a pity, but there was nothing else. The next step was speculation. The biggest suspense was whether the Queen would let Lord Ned continue to serve as the hand of the king when Joffrey succeeded to the throne. The answer was obviously no. So everyone was thinking about welcoming Lord Ned back as soon as possible. The real concern was that the Lannisters would hinder Lord Ned's return journey. For this reason, Robb considered hiring a large ship, and even asked Lord Stannis to send a fleet from Dragonstone to move all the people in Winter City and King's Landing back to Winter City. Unexpectedly, in less than 2 days, bad news came one after another. The first few messages were extremely confusing. Some said that Joffrey had succeeded to the throne and there was a conflict at the succession ceremony. Then there was the rebellion of the Lannisters, and the Prime Minister was surrounded in King's Landing. Just when everyone was in a panic and waiting for further information, no more birds came. About half a day later, the bird that finally came was a crow from Riverrun. Lord Edmure told Winter City that their insider in King's Landing had worked hard to send news that the Prime Minister's tower had been blood-bathed and Winter City's power in King's Landing had been wiped out. Countless officials, knights and retainers were killed or wounded. Hundreds of people including Septa Mordane, Tomad, Cain, Vaon and others were slaughtered. What happened in King's Landing was simply a massacre. It was confirmed that only Lord Ned was captured. The rest, including Sansa and Arya, were still alive or dead. Theon had never thought that Winterfell would be like this. In his memory, it was only Pike when he was 7 years old that was similar. The whole Winterfell was filled with panic. People were at a loss. Some left in a hurry, and more people entered the city in a panic. People were frantically trying to find out the news. On the streets and alleys, whether it was the adults in the castle or the beggars on the street, everyone's topic was King's Landing, the king, Stark and rebellion. Theon had no time to experience the chaos in the city. As Robb's confidant, he met with the captain of the garrison, the chief beast tamer, the Grand Maester and the vassal knights near Winterfell in the meeting hall in the First World. He had never seen Robb like this. He looked like he was frozen in ice. He was no longer a 15-year-old boy, but a cold lord. He told everyone the bad news of King's Landing in an emotionless tone like ice, and sought countermeasures. We have to send troops, and only the sword can make things clear. Theon was the first to stand up. He wanted to prove to everyone that he was Rob's brother, just like Robert and Ned. They were brothers of different surnames who were closer than brothers. I suggest not to overreact. The situation is chaotic. Maybe Lord Ned is too busy in King's Landing to take care of other things. I will use the best raven to send a Grand Maester Pycelle in King's Landing, and he should be able to give an accurate response. Master Luwin's method is still very safe, just like his people, but Theon disagrees. It's too slow. War is about time and efficiency, so Master Luwin is a maester, not a knight. We can gather troops and get information at the same time. As for the reason for the gathering, we can declare it to the outside world to deal with the threat of the Lannisters. After all, the King-Eater is preparing a large army in front of the Tully's territory. We have enough reasons. The captain of the garrison said. Several vassal states hoped that Rob would come forward to summon all the northern vassal states and nobles, and ask everyone to prepare for mobilization. Master Luwin opposed this. Please think about the consumption of Winterfell. It's not just a matter of money, but also food. Gathering a large army requires food and grass. Once the nobles bring their troops, we don't have enough food and grass to deal with it, and rebellion will occur. Rob's face was confused, and he never said a word, just like the Duke of Stark in Theon's memory. After everyone has spoken freely, he will give the final opinion. But can Rob really give an opinion? Who can he consult? Theon really wants him to come to him, but he is afraid that he can't give a good enough strategy to disappoint Rob. No matter how reluctant he is, he realizes that the fate of the people in Winterfell has come to a crossroads, and the future depends on Rob's decision. Chapter 78a. Game of Thrones. 4. Joffrey, with Violet and a hound, and surrounded by 5 armored knights, began his battle. This was not a bloody battle. No one would kill the future king. The problem was confusion and the effect of the crowd. Violet was lost, and Sigrid had no response when she contacted him. She could only act according to her own judgment. The fighting near the throne was soon quelled, not only because the Starks were fewer in number, but also because there were more important people here. The Lannister knights and officers in gold cloaks almost immediately surrendered and swore allegiance to Joffrey. The real trouble was outside. The killing in the city was not so easy to put out. They went to the Hand's Tower first. It was the main target of the Lannister attack. As they moved forward, there were corpses everywhere. Few red cloaks and gold cloaks, most of them were gray and white cloaks, and a large number of non-combatant bodies. Joffrey rushed forward and shouted, "The new king has ordered the killing to stop. Stop the killing." A red-cloaked man with bloodshot eyes thrust his spear from the side, but Violet cut it off. The Hound's long sword slashed down on the man's head, cutting him in half. Blood and viscera spilled all over the ground, stopping the slaughter in this area, but fighting continued in other parts of the Tower of the Hand, and screams continued. "Your Majesty, we will handle the matter here. Your body is so heavy." Before the flattering Iron Guard could finish his words, Joffrey jumped off his horse and ran into the tower first. The group left the gold cloaks to guard the horses, and the others followed on foot. The fierceness of the fight was like a battlefield. The blood dance of the Northerners was obvious, even though most of them were not wearing armor or even weapons, and many of them fought with sticks. This was a desperate battle. Violet was familiar with this situation. Whenever the losing side was attacked into the stronghold, such a scene would appear, and many times even women and children would join in the desperate counterattack that was almost suicidal. She did not see the black mist, which meant that everything was normal. The disaster of the Northerners was originally determined in the script of the world. She saw Septa Mordane, a woman who always had a serious face and claimed that etiquette was the armor of a housekeeper, lying in a pool of blood with her throat cut. It was hard to imagine why such a woman would be killed. She was obviously eliminated without any resistance. Seeing the fate of the Septa, she was worried about the girls. This was a battlefield. They had never experienced such a thing. Even in the martial north, ladies were not good at fighting. "Kill you." Joffrey sighed. The great cloak that had fallen like a corpse jumped up and slashed down with a bloody sword. Joffrey dodged quickly, but was caught by the man. "I ordered the killing to stop, don't you understand?" Joffrey shouted. The man threw away his long sword and grabbed his neck. The sword came down from behind him, and the great cloak turned into a strip of cloth, and the man's back was bloody. "You've killed everyone and you're still trying to be a good guy, duh." The man opened his eyes wide, spat out a mouthful of blood and died. Violet didn't know him. He should be an ordinary warrior from the north. Joffrey looked at the corpse in shock. "Damn traitor, I'll cut off his dog's head." The red cloak following Joffrey said, and was about to take action. The man was pushed away by Joffrey. He squatted down and closed his eyes for the dead. When he raised his head again, Joffrey's face was full of sadness. "It's meaningless to die like this," he murmured. Continuing to move forward, the silver armor was covered with blood. They intercepted Sir Meryn of the Iron Guard in the small square of the dining hall. He and the Red Cloak were about to attack the dying Braavosi. 4 red cloaks fell to the ground. "Stop, I order the killing to stop." Sir Meryn looked at Joffrey and suddenly pulled out a dagger and stabbed the Braavosi's neck. Violet stabbed the knight with her sword, and the knight's armor was hit 3 times in succession. He had to put away his dagger. Before he could draw his sword, the Hound's long sword was already pressed on his neck. "I was just following orders," Sir Meryn said, looking unwillingly at the bloody Braavosi. Another red cloak had already knelt aside. "You are the Iron Guard, you should not follow the orders of others, except me." Joffrey stepped forward and grabbed the staggering short man. Violet recognized that he was Arya's swordsmanship teacher and the chief swordsman of the Sea King, Syrio. "If it weren't for the wooden sword, these people would have died under my sword," Syrio said unyieldingly. "How is Arya?" Violet said anxiously. She liked the boyish girl very much and hoped that she could escape. "Ha, she has escaped from the city, you can't catch her." Syrio must have misunderstood, but it's a pity that there's no explanation here. "I command you in the name of the new king to stop the killing. If this Braavosi man dies, you will die." Joffrey's tone was sharp. It was the first time Violet saw him so angry. They couldn't stay for too long, let alone find Arya. She could only hope that the little girl could escape the danger with her agility. Joffrey continued to move forward. More red cloak bodies appeared along the way. They began to be attacked by armed northern warriors. It was even more difficult to get the desperate northern warriors to lay down their weapons. Even with her and the Hound's help, the effort to stop the fight still paid a price. 2 red cloaks, one was chopped seriously injured, and the other stayed to take care of the wounded. Every great cloak they met fell into a state of madness. These people did not listen to words and orders, but only knew how to kill. Joffrey had to fight back with his sword. It was too difficult to hold back in a life-and-death struggle. They chopped down no less than 5 northern warriors along the way, 3 of whom were seriously injured and 2 died. Joffrey's face was frighteningly pale. He was persistent in trying to stop the fighting. Violet was heartbroken, but she didn't know how to comfort him. She could only do her best to help him fulfill his wish. They found Sansa. The girl's eyes were dim and her screams were sad and resentful. When she saw Joffrey, she threw herself on him. Joffrey softened his expression and patted her back to comfort her gently. Joffrey asked Violet to take Sansa to a safe place, but she refused. "You still need me by your side." An Iron Guard took Sansa away. If the Prime Minister's tower was already a cruel place, then the gate of the Red Keep was a hell on earth. The northern warriors had made a breakout here, and more than a dozen great cloaks and knights in armor fell under dense arrows. The most pitiful thing was that behind the warriors, many unarmed men, women and children also fell in the rain of arrows. These people were not all shot to death by arrows. Many of them with sword wounds on their bodies, which were obviously done by the gatekeepers. "We have received orders that no one is allowed to leave the Red Keep," said the Lannister warrior guarding the gate proudly. He showed no discomfort at the massacre. "I am the new king, Joffrey Baratheon. If I want to go out now, will you shoot me into a hedgehog?" The officer lowered his head in fear when facing Joffrey with red eyes. After checking the bodies, a terrified survivor was found. She was trapped under the bodies of her family members. When the Hound found her and pulled her out, the girl screamed hysterically. Violet recognized that this was Jenny Poole, and the one who was pressing her was her father, Theon Poole, the steward of Winter City. In her memory, this was an honest man, diligent and hardworking. When he died, he seemed to be saying something with his eyes wide open, perhaps telling Jenny in his arms not to move. After comforting Jenny, he asked the Lannister warrior to take her to Sansa. Joffrey and his party left the Red Keep. Too much time had been wasted in the Red Keep, and the battle outside the city was basically over. There were corpses piled up at every street corner. Joffrey led his men around the city gates and personally ordered the gold cloaks guard in each gate not to kill anyone else, otherwise the new king would consider sticking their heads on the walls of the Red Castle. The gold cloaks agreed with fear and trepidation. Their final destination was the dock. It had been occupied by the Lannisters, and a large number of sailors, merchants and passengers were isolated in several warehouses for investigation. 4 corpses were stripped naked and thrown aside. There were 4 other grey cloaks mixed with the red cloaks, looking out of place. "What's going on?" the Hound asked. The Lannister officer in the lead Newman looked nervous. "Respected sir, we arrested the Stark's lackeys who were about to flee, and seized the Winterfell. According to the captain, they took the deposit from the Stark family and prepared to transport the women and gifts. Following the officer's direction, the captain's eyes were swollen like bread, and he was squatting on the roadside with blood all over his body. It can be imagined that the battle at the dock must have been fierce, although small. Joffrey turned his head and looked at everyone. So many people died, even innocent women and children were not spared, and they even massacred nuns. The game of power is simply a game of the devil. She saw in his eyes a kind of enlightenment after loss, and a determination after a fierce struggle. The black mist on Joffrey's body rose straight up and gradually spread to the entire dock. Violet stared at him at a loss. She sent an emergency call to Sigurd, who was far away in the Dothraki Sea, hoping that everything was not in time. Chapter 79 Serious illness. Swarms of bloodflies swarmed around him, their wings buzzing in his ears, almost maddening. Drogo rode at the head of the group on his red horse. The sun was high in the sky, and the heat evaporated from the exposed rocks. Sweat ran down his neck, sticking his linen underwear to his body uncomfortably. In this weather, he did not sweat. Drogo felt cold. Even in the hot sun, he did not feel even warm. There was only the clatter of horses' hooves and the tinkling of harebells. He was in no mood to pay attention to the flies, even though he hated them the most. The cold and pain seized his attention. He tried to look at the brown hills in the distance, but his vision was blurred. The wound that the witch had bandaged was itchy, so he had torn it off and applied the mud paste provided by the herbalist. He had been drinking forget-me-not milk, from mare's milk, and pepper beer for the past 2 days to calm the effects of the wound. The wound finally stopped hurting and itching, but it made him weaker. Even if he tried to deceive himself and stress that he would be healed after a good sleep, he had to admit that the wound was too serious to ignore. He hadn't eaten for several days. Losing appetite was not a good sign. Although he knew it, he didn't want to touch the beef, cheese, and biscuits in front of him. When he was in good health, whenever he saw Dany, he would ride with her and touch her growing belly. The little thing in her belly stretched out its little feet or fists to interact with him, which was extremely fun. Recently, he didn't care about these precious things anymore. Every morning he would wake up in pain and nightmares. In the dream, countless ghosts surrounded him, trying to pull him off his horse and drag him into the wasteland covered with ghost grass. He struggled hard and killed ghosts one by one with his scimitar. Some guys had been killed several times. Unfortunately, these things would appear in his dreams every night, announcing their existence. Husband. The voice came from a distant place, very beautiful. Drogo, my son in stars. Who was calling him? He didn't have the strength to respond. He just wanted to lie down and sleep peacefully, never having to get up again. He shook his head nervously, but his neck was stiff and his head was heavy. The world was rolling in front of his eyes. No. The beautiful voice screamed. His consciousness finally came back to reality and found himself lying on a mat of dry grass. Lying on the ground. He realized something. No, my horse. He struggled hard, but his body didn't move at all. I have to ride his horse, not here. He couldn't even hear his own voice. Blood of my blood. The deep and familiar voice was Khal Drogo. No. Drogo struggled hard. It was obvious that he could easily somersault in the air, but now he couldn't even stand up. I have to ride his horse, He hoped that the blood guards could help him. As long as he could still ride a horse, it didn't matter. He kept telling himself that he had to ride his horse. He fell off his horse. Hago's tone was heavy. Why didn't they help me? Stupid. As long as they helped him, he could continue to ride his horse. Don't say such things. A pleasant voice sounded, and he remembered that this was Dany, his Khaleesi. We have ridden far enough today, so I will set up camp here. His head was dizzy, and he didn't know what happened, but he felt a fire burning in his body. Do it now. Otherwise, when Drogo wakes up, he will want to know why you disobeyed me. Dany seemed to be arguing with someone. Why? Who in khalasar dared to challenge her? Someone helped him to approach the tent, a cold tent under the sun. He really wanted to hit the slaves hard. Why not light a brazier? Warmth appeared immediately. In the hazy vision, a burning brazier was brought up. Damn it, it's too cold, make the fire burn brighter. No one heard him speak. Even he himself couldn't hear clearly what he said. No. No. He shouted at the top of his lungs. He's dead. Snap. The crisp sound woke him up. Khal can't die. He is the father and the world's best horse. His hair has never been cut, and it is still tied with the bells his father left him. This time he heard it clearly. It was Dany's voice. She was defending herself. He wanted to get up and prove that he could still ride a horse, but his body kept working. He couldn't even turn his head. He needs a bath. Dany said. Drogo lost consciousness again. He woke up. Through the narrow slit of his eyes, he saw Donnie's anvil guard. Rumors are everywhere, spread all over the khalasar. The anvil guard said, "It is said that the Khal fell from his horse. Help him." Drogo didn't like her tone. She shouldn't ask other men for help, she just needed to obey him. They seemed to have done something, and the anvil looked very bad. "No." Donnie's voice was very soft. "Please, God save me." She begged the guard again. He was very angry, but he couldn't move. "Your Highness, your Khal is as good as dead." "What is this bastard talking about? Did he say I was dead?" "No. He can't die, he must not die, this is just a minor injury." Her voice was filled with sadness. "Please don't do this, don't cry like this." Drogo was angry at his own weakness. How could he fall down with a minor injury? "I won't let him die." The Ang smiled bitterly. "Whether you're a princess or a Khaleesi, this order is beyond your ability. Child, please hold back your tears. We have no time to grieve right now, let's go on. He's still alive." Drogo was confused. Why should he leave? She was his Khaleesi, why should she leave? "Go." "Where to?" "I suggest going to Ai. It's located in the far south, at the end of the world. There is a big port there." Drogo's vision blurred again, and he thought hard. Ai, the end of the world, is also the end of his ambition. He wants to lead the Khaleesi to conquer there. From there we will take a ship back to Pendos. Can you trust your calves? I need them to come with us. The anvil guard continued. The pain in his chest was so severe that Drogo could no longer stay awake. This time the coma was very short. When he woke up, the conversation was still going on. The anvil guard was still persuading. They submit to Drogo's power, that's all. After his death, Jacko, Bono and Otherker will begin to fight for his position. It was a strange feeling that he was still alive but could hear his own death. The whole khalasar will kill each other, and the victor will leave no survivors. Your child will be taken away as soon as it is born and fed to the wolves. Drogo was very angry. He wanted to roar and sacrifice those bastards who dared to hurt his son. Why? Why did they kill a little baby? She complained. Drogo's heart was bleeding. Because he is Drogo's son, the horse that rides the world, the little guy's achievements have been predicted by the Dorscarim. Rather than risk him growing up and coming back for revenge, it is better to end it early. Drogo's heart was broken. He regretted not listening to the witch's advice. If he didn't drink and tear off the ointment as she said, maybe this wouldn't happen. They must not hurt my son. Donnie shouted, "I will order my people to protect me, and Drogo's blood riders will." He was not used to this, and sadness made him confused. The wound is festering. I don't know how many times I woke up and heard the witch's voice, the culprit who made him like this. "Witch, look at what you have done." Koto roared on the side, and then the witch screamed. "Stop." In the chaos, he fell into darkness again. This time there were more ghosts around. They came from the sea of ghost grass on skeleton horses. They were no longer hostile to him, but waited respectfully. They greeted him and called him king. "No. I cannot die. My battlefield is the Dothraki Sea. It is not the time yet, at least until my son is born," Drogo ordered them. He shouted, but the ghost knights just shook their heads and waved to him, inviting him to join. Chapter 80 Blood Magic 1. No one is dead. Donnie screamed, "Sir Jorah, I need to borrow your swordsmanship." Jorah left. Unlike the delicate little beauty before, Donnie, who has now become a mother, has brown skin. The life on the grassland has left traces on her, but she is still a beauty. Seed transformed into a slave, the most inconspicuous one, hiding in the shadows and observing. He is not ready to show it yet. The situation is complicated, and we must first figure out the context before we can take action. There is no black fog on the Dothraki grassland, which means that everything that happens here is in the established arrangement of the root disaster. The reason why he came here in person is to interfere with the fate here. This is the biggest move he has made since he came to this world. He wants to change the fate of a person and cause a butterfly effect. He will deliberately create black fog and form controllable changes here. The problem is that he is not sure whose fate he wants to change, Drogo, Donnie or Roegel. Donnie is in fear. She paralyzes herself with meaningless things and busyness. He also found an interesting guy. Miri Mazdor, known as the Witch, was a fat, flat-nosed old woman. She mastered strange magic, and the reason why Drogo's wounds festered was directly related to the Witch. He felt similar magical fluctuations from the two. Donnie was begging the witch to help her. "My lady, it's too late. All I can do is guide him on the dark path and let him ride into the kingdom of night without pain. Tomorrow morning, he'll leave." The witch said. She was lying, using most of the facts to cover up a small part of the lie, and she covered it up very well. Donnie seemed to have been hit hard. She clutched her front with a painful look. She seemed to be praying. Praying is useless, and the gods only accept requests for curses. No, Donnie pleaded in a crying voice, as long as you save him, I will set you free. I swear to God. You must know other ways, some magic or, Donnie's expression gradually became crazy. He heard the violent heartbeat. The witch was only calm on the surface, and she was secretly happy because her plan succeeded. She knelt down and looked at Donnie with eyes as dark as the night. There is indeed a kind of magic. Her voice was calm. But my lady, this spell is not only difficult to perform, but also very dark. For many people, death is more straightforward. She said the truth. Sig couldn't help but wonder, what kind of magic is the sorcerer? I learned the spell in Agi and paid a great price. My mentor was a blood witch from the Shadowland. Sig's eyebrows jumped again and again. The memory of the world floating, and he observed the sorcerer meaningfully. Is there no other way? Donnie was falling into the trap. Sig stayed quietly not far away, watching everything happen. He could have stopped this farce, but he was really curious about what the so-called blood magic was. No. The sorcerer said calmly. The old woman seemed a little guilty, but showed strong anger. She hid her anger in her heart, and it took him some time to see the truth. Do it. Donnie ordered, saving quickly. The fire dragon in her body was raising its head and roaring. Without him, the dragons would sweep across the Dothraki Sea and spread to the Seven Kingdoms. You'll pay for it. The witch warned her. Gold. Horses. Donnie asked resolutely, obviously not caring about property. The witch's expression was solemn. Silver Lady, this is blood magic, only death can exchange for life. Death. Donnie reflexively protected her stomach. My death. No. The witch stared at her with ulterior motives. I can be sure that it is not your death. From the witch's gaze, Sigurd understood what she meant. The murderous intent flashed in his heart, and he had not made up his mind. Then do it. The naive Donnie said. Sigurd changed his appearance again, turning into Daniclus's tribe, helping Ricardo and Quirrell put Drogo in the bathtub. Drogo moved weakly, misride his horse. He stopped struggling after entering the water. Bring Daniclus's horse. The witch gave the order, and the young warrior hesitated for a moment, but still did it. Drogo led Drogo's red horse into the tent. As soon as they entered the tent, the horse began to roll its eyes and eye. Sigurd pretended to help everyone subdue the horse. I need blood, and this is the source of blood. The witch looked strange. She was very calm and peaceful, the calmness of death. Go easy. Drogo knelt down and begged, this can't be done, please let me kill the witch. Kill her, and you will kill the girl. Donnie said viciously. If you don't kill her, you will regret it even more. Sigurd said in his heart. This is blood magic. Drogo's face was full of horror. It's taboo. The young warrior trembled all over. I am Khaleesi. If I say it's not taboo, it's not. Donnie showed her stubborn side, and some people would interpret this attitude as the demeanor of a king. In the city of horse kings, the girl killed the horse and let me eat its heart. The ceremony now is the same as it was then. Donnie screamed hysterically. So everyone held down the screaming and kicking horse. The witch muttered in a special language. Sig felt the flow of energy around him, and the energy of death was gathering. A knife suddenly appeared in her hand. It was a magical knife. The blade was simple and red, and the leaf-shaped blade was engraved with spells. The purpose of the spell was very dark. The knife cut across the horse's neck, and the horse screamed and trembled violently, and blood was like a red fountain. Everyone desperately supported the horse to prevent it from collapsing. The power of the mount is passed on to the rider. The witch chanted loudly. Her chanting was a deception. The power of death was not sung by her, Sig judged her so. The power of the beast is passed on to humans. This woman was talking nonsense. The warriors of Kos trembled with fear. Sig calmly observed everything that happened. The bathtub was full of blood. Only Drogo's face was exposed. The witch didn't eat the body, and waved her hand to let people burn the horse's body. Sig hid in the corner of the tent. People were busy and afraid, and had no time to pay attention to an insignificant slave. The witch sprinkled red powder on the brazier, and the spicy aroma filled the tent in an instant. The maids fled. Silver Lady, you have your leave too. The witch told her. The fun was about to begin. Still no one paid attention to him. No, I want to stay. Donnie said firmly, this man is united with me and gave life to the fetus in my body. I can't leave him. You must leave. My spell will awaken the ancient darkness. The dead dance here, and the living cannot stay here. Donnie lowered her head helplessly. She walked to the bathtub and said goodbye to Drogo. Please bring him back for me. She said to the witch with tears in her eyes. The witch's voice changed from shrill to wailing. The light from the brazier illuminated the tent red, and countless shadows invaded from outside. This is the beginning of real magic. The witch began to dance, not alone. Sig was motionless, not caring about the approach of the monster. The witch didn't notice him, and the monsters didn't notice him either. He watched everything coldly, analyzing the witch's tricks. Nothing to be afraid of. Various monsters from the Kingdom of Night were wandering around. Sig finally attracted the attention of the powerful monsters, and they approached him. He spat, reached out and grabbed the closest one. Howling in pain, he tore the thing into pieces and threw the remains aside. The remaining monsters were attracted by the wreckage and rushed over eagerly. The wailing turned shrill. There were sounds of fighting and women screaming outside the tent. He decided to leave for a while. Outside the tent, Dany fell to the ground holding her belly. Drogo's bloodleader Koto stepped forward quickly, and Ricardo and Quarrel, who were guarding the door, took action. The latter took a step forward, holding a long whip. Unexpectedly, Koto's movements were faster. He jumped up gracefully like a dancer, and stabbed Quarrel's chest with his arc. The young warrior fell backwards, panting, and blood flowed like a red fountain. Chapter 81 Blood Magic 2. Koto drew his scimitar. Your opponent is me. Sir Jorah drew his longsword. Koto cursed and whirled, slashing at him with his arc so fast that Quarrel's blood turned into rain in the hot wind. Jorah barely managed to catch the attack. Sigurd walked aside. No one cared about the slave. Not even Dany recognized him. The two held their ground for a moment, the edges of their swords trembling. Koto roared loudly, and the night was silent. Koto leapt back, and the night rushed in close. Koto's hand flashed wide, the after-image of the arc, and Sir Jorah tried to resist again. The scimitar slashed on the mail in the iron gauntlet, sparking. It didn't take long for Koto to gain the upper hand. Sir Jorah retreated, and Koto suddenly jumped to attack. Half of Jorah's face was covered in blood, and he was hit in the ribs again. Sig sighed. He didn't want to kill these blood riders. They would be useful in the future. Unfortunately, even he could only do his best in this state. The heavy sword swung in the air, and the whistling air shocked the whole audience. The slave's brown skin fell off, revealing the white inside. His height suddenly grew taller, and his black braids spread out, gradually turning silver. The brown almond eyes turned into slanted violet pupils. Koto tried to turn around and resist with a cry, but he and his beloved Arak were cut in half, and his internal organs and blood splattered, and the onlookers shouted. Dany didn't look right. She looked painful, and her feet were wet. Raoul was coming out. In the tent, the witch's roar was no longer human. The dying Quarrel begged for water. Dany wailed for help. Ricardo and Hago fought, and the two scimitars hit each other. Drogo's wood cracked and entangled Hadga's neck. The bloodleader fell down, and Ricardo jumped up, and the scimitar fell from the air and stuck between Hadga's eyebrows. Some people in the tribe threw stones at Dany. She cried and hugged her belly to protect the child. More people threw stones at her. Sig was sorting out the scene. He was looking for a breakthrough. There was no point in killing people casually. Drogo Khalasar's tribe would also be Dany's tribe in the future. She couldn't lose too many. Dany tried to crawl to the tent, but Khal grabbed her hair and pulled her back, with a blade on her neck. My baby! She screamed. The sharpness of the heavy sword came from top to bottom, and Khal broke it in two before he could do anything. Sig looked up and scanned everyone with his purple eyes. The tribesmen knelt in fear, and stones fell to the ground. There were also brave people who wanted to escape from the side, and Sig's greatsword flew out with a spin. A guy who had thrown a stone just now was nailed to the hard mud and wailed. No one dared to move. Most people knelt on the ground and begged for forgiveness in Dothraki. The setting sun cast a dim yellow, and the bonfire in the khalasar camp was blazing. Dany had not yet realized who saved her, and she was breathing hard and gasping. The chanting of the witches was like a dirge at a funeral. No one dared to approach the tent. Dark shadows were circling and ghosts were haunting. Jorah picked up Dany, and she screamed and twitched in pain in his arms. Jorah shouted loudly for her mates, but no one dared to approach. Doria, you're damned, hurry up and find the midwife. Jorah roared. Sigurd looked at him and saw his heart. They refused to come, saying she was cursed. Jorah swore that he would chop off the heads of all the midwives in the future, but it was no use. The maids just cried on the side, and even they refused to help. Witch, take her to the witch. Agnes shouted. Come and give her to me. Sigurd realized something. He walked up to Jorah and took Dany over. The knight wanted to say something, but he didn't. He turned back to Dany's men and said, stay here. If there's any danger, hold them back first. I will deal with them when I come out. He gave the order in the coldest tone he could. "No," Dany was shouting. Her lips moved but she didn't say a word. Sigurd knew what she meant without her saying anything. He leaned down and whispered in her ear, "Don't be afraid. I'll take care of everything. There is nothing scary in the tent. I will take care of those things." In the tent, countless figures danced around the brazier and the bloody bathtub. The shadows cast on the rough cloth of the tent were particularly dark, and many of them of no human shape at all. There were giant wolves and something with a snake-like neck. He saw claws and fangs, as well as infinite sorrow and resentment towards life. "The goat woman knows all the secrets of the bloody birthing bed," Irri said. "I heard what she said." "Yes, I heard it too," Doria agreed. Dany was roaring silently. She tried desperately to break free from his arms. He realized that she also saw those shadows, those things from the realm of death. "You all move away too. There are indeed things here. I can't protect many people," Sig said gently to the maids. They showed surprised expressions and then bowed outside the tent. Hearing about the bloody birthing bed, his heart moved slightly and made a decision. Holding Dany in his arms, he stimulated the power in his body, which did not belong to this body, but the real power of Sig. Every part of his body was wailing. It was obvious that it was too much for an ordinary human body to accept him. He carefully controlled the degree of power to avoid really breaking Viserys apart. This person's death was not a pity, but his identity was still very useful. The power gathered, and he felt everything that happened in a wider range. Dany's trembling. Rhaegal's anxiety to leave his mother's womb. The panic of Kaz's people. Further away, the fear of war horses and camels. The plots that the bandits at Khalasar were discussing with their confidants. More and more roaring warriors were gathering. His perception range was getting farther and farther, covering the entire Khalasar and even beyond. He felt the emotions of countless pastures in the Dothraki Sea, hidden dozens of miles away, the suspicion and fear from the mercenaries. He did not expand his consciousness any further. This body had reached its limit. He converged his consciousness, focused his attention on the tent, and stepped into it at the same time. He could hear the unified inhalation of the tribesmen behind him and Dany's desperate lament. Purple eyes scanned the tent, and the frenzied and weird group dance stopped abruptly, and even the flames in the brazier shrank in fear. "Everyone is very happy." He did not use a certain language, but directly spread his consciousness. Wherever his consciousness spread, ghosts trembled and fled. Wherever his eyes went, the shadows all fled. He was like lava flowing into the snow, nothing could stop him. The witch who was dancing crazily and singing strange ballads became quiet. The fat woman with the flat nose suddenly became smaller and shrank aside, trembling. Miri Mazdor, his voice was like coming from the bottomless abyss, ethereal and cold. The witch raised her head with difficulty. Great Demon King, Demon King." A disdainful smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. "Do you think I am such a weak creature?" The witch's face changed drastically and she kept kowtowing. "Do you know the secret of the bloody delivery bed?" His question was more like a confirmation. Respected, I only know a little." He nodded, and every movement was so steady and powerful. He would not make unnecessary movements. Now, every breath he took could kill some weak monsters. The ghosts and shadows disappeared, as if they had never existed. Sig spat, his saliva splashing on a silk pillow, making a hissing sound, and watched the pillow melt away. The witch just glanced at him, with fear on her face, not daring to look up. "Coincidentally, I also know the secret of the bloody delivery bed." His voice was soft, making people's scalps numb. "I also know how to deal with the toxins in the wound. So you take care of Dany and our child, and I will rescue the Horse King." "But, noble magic, the wound on the horse warrior has festered and cannot be cured. His life can only be redeemed at a price." The witch stared at him in the bloody bathtub uncertainly, her voice trembling. "Oh, it needs a price." Sig's smile was dangerous. "Didn't we just summon so many volunteers from the Kingdom of Night? Let one or two of them sacrifice themselves," he said lightly, and the witch swallowed the words in her mouth. She began to prepare for Dany's delivery. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novellas. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 82 Blood Magic 3. Sig has a special vision. He can see all objects, not only living things, but even the death of the world itself. In the world where he gained this ability, it is called the Eye of Death. This supernatural ability is also the Eye of Truth. He sees the death of all objects and the truth of all objects. When he focused his mind and saw death, he glimpsed the truth of Drogo, the truth of Roegel, the truth of Dany, and the truth of the witch. He sighed. As the saying goes, 8 out of 10 things in life are not satisfactory. Even he who has the power to fight against gods cannot escape this law. Drogo and Roegel. The two most important men in Dany's life. They may be irreparable. Sig is not omnipotent, although he has great power and can defeat demons and angels. Whether he is the king of the abyss of hell or the six-winged monster of heaven in front of him, it is just a matter of punching, kicking, and tearing. Countless demons and countless angels have suffered under his most primitive attack. But he is not omnipotent. In terms of creation and salvation, his power or influence is much lower. He couldn't really save someone, and even giving birth required the help of a midwife. The only thing he could do was to help people remove curses and poisons, and the rest depended on the person being saved. The same was true when he treated King Robert. He manipulated Violet to stop bleeding, strengthen Robert's heart, and eliminate infection, but Robert still had to rely on himself to recover. Robert was the person with the strongest desire to survive that he had ever seen, and Drogo was obviously no match for Robert in this regard. Sig drove away the creatures of the night with hope, and helped Drogo kill the puss in his body. The wound was no longer at risk of infection, but he couldn't get the once undefeated king to stand up. Drogo's life was dissipating, and Sig had no ability to inject new strength into him. The witch trembled and reminded Sig, "Great king. Lady Silver is not in good condition. Her child is very strange, with scales and wings." She paused. "This is really not my doing. Before you came in, the night people had left. It's not my fault." Sig had to cheer up. He hoped to at least keep Roegel and ride the horse of the world. The Eye of Truth saw Roegel in the womb and was half heartbroken. He understood that the Targaryen family was really the descendants of dragons, and figured out why the ancient dragons obeyed them. They had a blood relationship with dragons. Roegel already had the embryonic form of a dragon. His body shape was too unique. Save the mother or the child, you can only choose one. The witch looked at him tremblingly. She didn't like to make choices. People with real strength and power didn't make choices. Dany was in pain and screamed, "My king, it's too late. The Silver Lady can't hold on for too long." The witch warned him. He watched and thought with all his strength. With the Eye of Death, he could kill Roegel without killing Dany with just a slight scratch with a dagger, or give Dany a quick death without hurting Roegel. But he couldn't do that. If he killed Dany, the trauma of the world would be enough to cause it to go out of control. If Roegel died, all his previous efforts would be in vain. He had to start from scratch, and maybe he would never find a suitable opportunity to intervene again. The layout of King's Landing will not be echoed, and everything will eventually return to the established facts. The wheel of fate will roll over all living beings, erasing the influence of him and Violet. Ah! Dany's scream was cruel. Little Roegel stretched out his claws and was sticking open his mother's belly. Sig's speed was as fast as lightning. The witch's ancient knife came into his hand at some point. He raised his hand and stabbed the blade into Dany's lower abdomen, stopping Roegel's movement. Dany had a high fever. Her eyes moved rapidly under her eyelids. "I don't want to sleep the dragon's wrath," she shouted. She was not out of danger yet. The original plan was to save Roegel Drogo, free up his hands to lead the mercenaries to find the bandits in khalasar and talk to them separately. I believe that after seeing his terrifying strength, the bandits will reconsider the issue of staying or leaving. The reality is that he can't get away. Drogo khalasar has fallen apart. Dany's condition was very critical. The only way he could think of was to sneak into her dream and save the poor girl from the nightmare of the abyss. His forehead touched the girl's forehead directly. He merged with her consciousness. He felt everything she felt, including pain and fear. She was the only one using the long corridor, with a high stone arch above. She wanted to look around to confirm where she was, but she didn't dare to turn her head. In the far distance, there was a door. Due to the distance, it looked quite small. It was a red door. Seeing the door, she thought of home. She staggered, and Sig urged her to speed up. Her bare feet left a series of bloody footprints on the stone slabs. "You don't want to wake the wrath of the sleeping dragon, right?" She heard his voice, so ironic. In her mind, he was the representative of fear and sin. The sun shone on the Dothraki Sea, and there was a smell of soil and death in the air. The wind blew the grass, and the waves were vast. She once again felt the warmth and belonging of home. Drogo hugged her from behind. The sea of grass disappeared, and huge wings covered the sky. The world became a sea of fire, and the rest of the world was pitch black. "You don't want to wake the wrath of the sleeping dragon, right?" Many faces appeared and disappeared. In the brazier in front of them, 3 stone eggs lay quietly. She looked at the dragon eggs, and Sig looked at the dragon eggs. The three fossils seemed to come alive, glowing and heating like red-hot coals, and smoking. Blood magic has a price, the price of life. The voice of the witch echoed in the sky. The last true dragon, she heard someone say. Sig was thoughtful. Dani was chasing the darkness behind her. She couldn't turn back, or she would die. She listened to her heart. Dani ran on the stone slabs, but the darkness behind her was getting closer and closer. You don't want to wake the wrath of the sleeping dragon, right? She saw her brother. You bitch, real dragons don't humble themselves, and you are not allowed to boss real dragons around. I am a real dragon. Sig looked at her hand in surprise. She clearly didn't mean to raise her hand, but her arm automatically raised. The slender little hands grasped her brother's face, and the creepy sound of flesh and bones breaking came. Her brother's eyes bulged out, and black jelly remained on his cheeks. You don't want to awaken the wrath of the sleeping dragon, right? The red door was far ahead, and the cold air was behind her, and the cold wind blew on the back of her neck. She would die. If she was caught, she would definitely die, and she would fall into eternal darkness. She ran quickly. You don't want to awaken the wrath of the sleeping dragon, right? The heat in her body was amazing, as if she was burning. Drogo was tall and majestic, with bronze skin, silver hair, and violet almond eyes. He smiled at her and reached out to hug her. He opened his mouth, but a billowing flame spurted out. In a heartbeat, the child was burned to ashes. She cried, and her tears flowed for the child who would never be born. You don't want to wake the dragon, do you? On both sides of the long hall, skeletons dressed in kingly attire gathered around her, holding crystal swords of pale flame in their hands. Quick! They kept shouting, the voices coming from her mind. Run! She ran. Running wildly on the lava road. The lava covered the stone road, getting higher and higher. She screamed in intense pain, her skin was torn, blood was splattered, and the shadows of huge wings covered both sides of the long hall. She flew up. Wake up the dragon, the red door was no longer far away. The long hall collapsed, and the lava turned into a winding river of fire on the ground. She flew away from the burning earth, flew over the dog-throcky sea, and flew higher and higher. All creatures in the world fled under her wings. The smell of home, the scenery of home. A simple stone house next to a warm green field, that is her home and a warm embrace. She opened the door. What she saw was her brother Robert in black armor. She had never seen Robert before, but she recognized him immediately. On his chest was a three-headed dragon that breathed fire. He rode a black horse, and in the narrow slits of his helmet, flames burned. The last descendant of the dragon, someone whispered in her ear. She walked forward, unfastened the visor of her helmet with trepidation. What she saw was herself. Chapter 83 Blood Magic. 4. No. Dani woke up screaming. Sig sat cross-legged beside her, and when he saw that she was awake, he told Queen to give her some water. Save me. She whimpered softly. His approach did not make her relax, and fear crept onto her face. Sig smiled and stopped moving closer. Please, Dani shouted in a hoarse voice. It seemed that it was difficult for her to make a sound, but Sig knew what she wanted. Merging with her consciousness, he understood her feelings and thoughts. He walked away, and the dragon eggs were placed in a box specially used to store jewelry. When he took back the 3 stone eggs, Dani's few trusted followers gathered together and tried to get her to sleep. She resisted hard and wanted to explain her needs, but the insistence of the people around her and the ogre that helped her sleep forced her to fall asleep again. My lord, what are you going to do with these stone eggs? Jorah's face was haggard. In one night, he seemed to have aged more than 10 years. The witch looked at him silently, the fear in her eyes had not subsided. Although she was no longer trembling, she seemed afraid to speak to him actively. We will need this. He handed the dragon egg to the witch. You go and follow my instructions to prepare the blood magic circle, and try to arrange it as neatly as possible. Hearing the term blood magic, the maiden Jorah was shocked, and they looked at him in horror. The witch had a complicated expression, respected king. She seemed to be troubled by the title for him. She changed the title of Demon King to King, which seemed out of place. Blood magic is not so easy to perform. It not only requires concentration and consumes a lot of precious materials, but also costs life. She took a breath, as if forcing herself to calm down. Sig smiled at her. This was a poor woman. No matter why she had learned blood magic before, she was obviously a competent priestess and healer among the sheep people. It's a pity, I understand what you mean, but you seem to underestimate me. After only one look, I can understand the secrets of blood magic and make some small improvements to this magic. He said it very modestly, but the witch's expression was beyond shock. She must have understood what he meant. For ordinary people, to improve magic, it must be something that requires extremely profound attainments and a deep understanding of magic. It is not something that anyone can imagine with a snap of the head. For Sig, this little thing is just a piece of cake. Dawnie woke up again, and she was much more energetic. I have a dry mouth. Without Sig's order, the maids brought her warm water. The mother who had just hit a miscarriage drank the water in one breath. The maid wiped the sweat from her forehead. Am I sick? She looked at him in confusion, and it took her a while to understand. Brother. You little girl, I haven't seen you for a few months, and you don't even recognize your brother. He said casually. She looked him up and down, with a puzzled look on her face. You are not my brother. Sig was drinking water to moisten his throat and almost sprayed it at Dawnie's face. I'm talking to you. Brother won't be so gentle. Her voice was so thin that it was hard to hear clearly. Soon the witch came, and Sir Jorah also came to visit. The two of them stared at Sigurd curiously for a few seconds before paying attention to Dawnie's situation. The witch gave Dawnie fruit wine, which was the compensation paid to Drogo by the caravan for the failed assassination. Dawnie was very weak. After drinking the wine, she murmured that she wanted stone eggs. They put a dragon egg in her arms and she fell asleep. The third time Dawnie woke up was already the evening of the second day. Sigurd was the first to sense that she had regained consciousness and rushed into the tent. The beautiful woman was holding a milky white dragon egg in her arms. The eggshell was covered with cream-colored scales. If you look closely, you can see that there are spiral patterns of gold and copper on the scales. He sensed the heat under the dragon egg. The girl, who was sweating all over when she arrived, was carefully stroking the dragon egg, just like all new mothers stroking their babies, delicately and gently. There was fetal movement in the dragon egg, which was Sigurd's masterpiece, but the dragon egg could not hatch any living thing. The thing inside had no soul. Only by injecting soul can that thing live. Dawnie watched him come in. Her expression was calm and she showed a gentle smile. She was no longer afraid of him. I want some water, and please help me get some fruit. I want to eat dates. She spoke clearly and calmly. After telling the maids her request, she looked at Sig. She suddenly couldn't continue, and uttered the name with difficulty. Where is Drogo? Is my husband? Her eyes immediately turned red. He is still alive, but he will not live long. He told her frankly. After experiencing all this, especially everything in her dream, she has become very strong. For strong people, telling the truth is more effective. She turned around and looked around. The maids found various excuses to escape from the tent, leaving only her running. How is my son, Roegel? She looked a little confused. You know, he didn't try to comfort her. I know. She stared blankly ahead. I feel him moving away from me, as if he had never existed. He looked at her quietly. She was lost in memories, sometimes shy, sometimes sad. When Jorah and the witch came in, she was fiddling with the other two dragon eggs. She took Jorah's hand and asked him to touch the dragon eggs. What does it feel like? She asked hopefully. The eggshell, hard as stone. Jorah's expression was cautious and lonely, on scales. Is it hot? Her question made Sigurd's heart move. Not hot, cold stone. Jorah pulled his hand away and asked worriedly, Your Highness, are you okay? Sigurd was surprised that Dawnie deliberately avoided him and didn't even pull him to touch her dragon eggs. Was she afraid that he would hit her? Or was it an unconscious resistance? What's wrong with my child? Dawnie turned to the witch. It was strange that she didn't ask her brother this question at the first time. Is he dead? He has never lived. The child is a monster. The witch said, he is a deformed and twisted little thing, covered with scales like a lizard, blind, with a tail and a spud, and small wings like a bat. He is still alive, but he has no heartbeat, no consciousness, and the child is still alive. Sig interrupted. The witch lowered her head, closed her mouth. Her eyes were full of fear. Facing Dawnie's puzzled eyes, I killed half of him, not completely. It's really a dilemma. If you don't kill him, you will die, and I can't find a suitable container to bear his soul. This is the only way for the time being. He is not a monster. When I entered the tent, I could still feel him, healthy and strong. Dawnie said seriously, I felt him punching and kicking constantly, eager to come to the world. The witch looked at Sig. She stopped talking. Perhaps she dared not to speak, before entering the tent. Maybe it was like that. After entering, countless children of the night, ghostly shadows wanted to invade his body. Dawnie stared at him nervously. Didn't she realize that he was the murderer of her son? I didn't let those things get close. They are full of threats to ordinary people, but to me, they are as fragile as bubbles. He stretched out his hand and made a gesture of crushing something. If so, my child should be normal. Why? And that black shadow, I felt it, I can't look back. It's not the black shadow, nor those strange things, but you yourself. Sig sighed. You can also say it's us, something in our blood, something belonging to the dragon was activated by magic. At that time, the child's body mutilated, and his mind went berserk. If you don't kill him, your stomach will be torn apart. He stopped. Donnie was already in tears. I would rather you kill me. She kept shaking her head, as if she had been enduring it. My lovely child, he is so tall and handsome. Her emotions were strong, and soon she burst into tears. After crying, there was a long silence. Jorah, the witch in the mix, peeked at him from time to time. He waited patiently for Donnie to release him. Where is Drogo? I paid with my horse, my child, and Corel, Koplo, Hagga, and Kahoro, many times the price. She stood up suddenly. I want to see what I have exchanged my life for. She ordered. As you wish. The witch said, please follow me. Chapter 84 Blood Magic. 5. Sig and Jorah helped her out of the tent. The sun was like molten gold, burning the earth. She hadn't been out for a long time, so she shielded her eyes with her arms and took a while to continue. Dozens of horses walked around and ate grass beside the embers of the campfire. A few tents and sleeping bags dotted the wasteland. Children gathered around and looked at them curiously. In the distance were women and hunched old men. There were only 140 people left in the khalasar, less than 1% of its heyday. There were 40,000 warring warriors and about twice as many tribesmen, but now there was only wind and dust. Drogo's khalasar has left. She sighed. A Khal who can't ride a horse is not qualified to lead them. Sig answered her in a steady but cold voice. The Dothraki followed the strong. Sir Jorah added, Your Highness, I'm sorry, we can't keep anyone. He looked tired and helpless. He must have been running around to keep the strength of the khalasar these days. But who would care what he said? Ponoka was the first to leave. He called himself Gopano, and many people followed him. Then Jabga Walser left the khalasar with a large number of people. Others took advantage of the night to disappear in large and small groups, and it became what it is now day by day. There will be more than a dozen new khalasars in the Dothraki Sea in the future, and the Grass Sea will experience turmoil and killing again. Drogo muttered to himself, and everyone could hear his voice. How is it possible? Sig's words made Drogo stare at him in confusion. Those fools who call themselves Khals will soon understand the harm of short-sightedness. There will only be one khalasar in the Dothraki Sea, even Daenerys' khalasar. There will only be one Khal. Drogo snorted and turned his head away. The old, the cowardly, the weak and the sick-stayed, as well as those of us who swore an oath. Agga's voice was full of bitterness. He came behind Oni. We will never leave you. Khaleesi, they took the herd. Ricardo said sadly, we are too few to stop them. It is the right of the strong to rob the weak. He clenched his fist unwillingly. They also took many slaves, both from the Khal and yours. Where is Eroy? Donnie asked hurriedly. Sig learned the situation from Drogo's memory. In the city of the good people, the female slave she took from Jarcho's men was a frightened girl. Donnie took good care of her. Mago took her away. He was Jarcho's bloodhoarder. Drogo said hatefully, he vented on her first, then gave her to Jarcho, and then Jarcho gave her to his blood riders. There were 6 of them in total. After that, they cut her throat. This is her fate. Agga comforted Donnie. Perhaps it is her fate. Donnie bit her lip. But Mago's fate will be worse. I swear by the gods old and new, by the good in the horse and all the gods that live on earth, by the mother mountain and the womb lake of the world. Before I deal with them, Mago and Jabga will beg me to show them the mercy they gave to Eroy. The Dothraki looked at each other uneasily. Khaleesi, the Maidari said in a coaxing tone like she was talking to a child, Yako is the Khal, and he has 20,000 cavalrymen behind him. Donnie was unmoved. She held her head high. I am Daenerys Stormborn, a princess of the Targaryen family, a descendant of Eddie the Conqueror and Maegor the Cruel. My bloodline can be traced back to the ancient Valyrian nation. I am the daughter of the true dragon. I swear these people will scream and die in pain. No. Donnie was choked by Sig's words. She looked back at him painfully, because they have no chance to scream. Because of you, a little girl, I can't get away, and the result seems to be that some bored guys are too rampant. So they can't wait for your revenge. They will tremble under the iron hoofs of my leadership, and then silently annihilate in the sea of grass. His tone was certain, as if announcing a predetermined conclusion. Take me to see Khal Drogo. Donnie stared at him for a while without comment, then looked away. Drogo lay on the red sand, looking at the sun. A swarm of bloodflies had settled on him, but he seemed oblivious. She knelt beside him and brushed the flies away. His eyes were wide open, and he ignored her. She leaned down and whispered his name in his ear. He ignored her. The wound on Drogo's chest had healed completely, and the scar was gray and red, and hideous. Why is he here alone? Donnie stared at Drogo with lifeless eyes. Your Highness, he seems to enjoy the warmth of the sun. Sir George frowned. His eyes follow the sun. He walks, but he must be led. He eats when food is placed in his mouth and drinks when water is placed on his lips. Donnie kissed Drogo's forehead, stood up and said to the witch, your magic has a high price. He survived. The witch said calmly, you asked for his life, and you paid with your life. This is not life. Donnie's eyes were filled with tears. His life is laughing, roasting meat by the campfire, and riding a horse. He loves holding an orc in his hand, facing the enemy on his warhorse, and the sound of the bells in his braids. His life is his blood riders, me, and our children. The witch did not answer, but just looked at her coldly. How long will it take for him to be like before? Donnie glared at the witch. Wait until the sun rises in the west and sets in the east. The witch answered with a chant, wait until the sea dries up and the mountains turn into sand and dust. Wait until your womb starts moving again. Haha, I thought it was really impossible. Is that the only condition? Sig left. The witch looked back at him nervously, the sun rises in the west and sets in the east. It's not difficult to do. We just need to change the direction of our Earth's rotation. Although it takes some effort. He paced in front of the witch and Donnie, the sea dries up and the mountains turn into sand and dust. This is even simpler. Generally, all landforms will change dramatically in less than 100,000 years. If you are lucky and encounter a huge meteorite falling, you may see this scene in your lifetime. Sig smiled and approached the flat-nosed witch, who took 2 steps back, but I am curious, can it really be done? Even if those things happen. The witch stared at him with a pale face. Others looked at Sig inexplicably. She knew the result and the price. Sig shook his head, but she still made you pay the price. They burned my temple. It was wrong. The flat-nosed woman said calmly, they angered the Supreme Shepherd. The gods don't care about such trivial matters. He has more than one temple. He doesn't care how much his believers suffer. You don't understand them. This is your anger. You want to take revenge. Don't use the gods as a shield. Sig looked at the witch indifferently. You deceived me and murdered the child in my belly. Donnie stared at the flat-nosed woman. Yes, the horse riding the world can no longer burn down cities. His khalasar can no longer destroy other countries. The witch's expression was not the fear and guilt after being exposed, but more of a relief. I pleaded for you. Donnie said painfully, I saved you. She stared at the witch. Save me. The flat-nosed lady spat. My temple was destroyed, and the people I worked so hard to treat were killed. Before you came, countless irreversible things had already happened. The witch choked with sobs. My home was burned down by them. There were piles of heads everywhere on the street. Among them were the baker who made bread for me and the little boy I saved with great difficulty. I still think of the scene at that time in my dreams to this day. It was simply hell on earth. Tell me, what did you save? I saved your life. Donnie said with difficulty. Take a good look at Jericho. When the beauty in life disappears, what is the meaning of just one life? The witch smiled coldly. Donnie's lips moved, but she couldn't make a sound. From this perspective, you've done pretty well. Sig came up to the woman, the smile of victory on her face disappeared, and she shrank aside. But you're wrong. This kind of thing, hellish massacres have accompanied the development of mankind. Do you think your ancestors haven't done the same thing? You haven't burned down cities before, or attacked other tribes when they were careless. He raised his head to the sky. How do you know that there are no people like you among the tribes, cities, and ethnic groups harmed by the sheep people? He stared at her sarcastically. He used his ability to force her to look at him. And you destroyed Drogo khalasar, and more than a dozen new Kharas appeared on the grassland. Lhasa, they will also plunder and conquer other cities and tribes. Due to their large numbers and insufficient strength, they must establish their prestige through killing, unlike Drogo khalasar, who gradually get used to using trade to exchange for peace. Can you say that it is for more people not to be killed? The witch's face was gloomy. You also saw that although she couldn't save your city, Donnie still saved you and the women she met, but because of what you did, she lost her rights, and most of these women were plundered and even lost their lives. Can you tell Ella that you are avenging her? Sig spoke harshly, and the witch fell to the ground and cried bitterly. I didn't want to do that, but I provoked them again. Why do I have to suffer this disaster? Looking at the flat-nosed lady sitting on the ground and throwing a tantrum. Others either observed coldly or sighed, life is like this. Although the rules of the world are cruel, they are traceable. The sins of the weak not only mean that the weak will be beaten, but also that the weak are extremely cruel. The city of the sheep people is as fragile and weak as Drogo's khalasar, so both were destroyed. Sigurd looked at Dany, who looked back at him, so he had to take action to build a strong country on the Dothraki grasslands and in this barbaric state of the survival of the fittest, so that the tragedy of Unr will not happen again. How to do it? Dany shook her head and smiled bitterly, just me, and you, the bitter king. Chapter 85 Blood Magic 6. They led Drogo to the tent, and Dany ordered them to prepare bath water and flower petals, and then let them leave. Sig stopped Dany from arresting a witch. Then he found the mercenaries and asked them to camp around the camp. Your Majesty, what should we do next? The captain of the mercenaries said respectfully. He seemed to have mistakenly believed that the destruction of Drogo's khalasar was related to Sig, so he looked at him as if he saw a god. Wait for me, I'm done with things here, I'm going to deal with the Khal named Yako. It is said that he has 20,000 roaring warriors, and I need your help. Sig said casually as if he was ordering dinner to be prepared. But, we only have a few hundred people, and we can't threaten a khalasar with 20,000 people. The captain obviously misunderstood something. Don't worry, I'm not asking you to fight, I need you to help me transport Yako's treasure back to Pendos. I'll kill the people, and you just watch. The captain's expression was a mixture of disbelief and awe. In the end, the captain didn't ask anything, lowered his head and left. Sigurd stayed by the tent until the moon was at its highest point. There were soft sobs and sounds of struggle coming from the tent. He strode into the tent under the watchful eyes of 2 Dothraki guards. Dany was pressing a feathered pillow against Drogo's face. She was sobbing, and Drogo's body was struggling instinctively. He stepped forward and pulled Dany away, moving the feathered pillow away. The 2 guards followed him, watching everything that happened in the tent with confusion. He can't come back, never again. Dany cried hysterically. No, I will bring him back. It's not this body that matters, but his soul. Sigurd left her behind, don't do stupid things again. Since you're paid such a high price, you should at least get something of equal value, you're too young and don't know how to bargain. I know, I'll help you get the reward you deserve. He pointed to the sky and left the tent. This was a dead place with red sand all over the field, dry and scorched, and wood was hard to find. Sig mobilized all his men and promised the mercenaries extra rewards so that they would bring back things that were easy to burn. Tangled cottonwood, purple bushes and brown grass. He personally found 2 tall and straight trees and chopped them down with a heavy sword. He ordered his men to peel off the bark and split the wood into regular shapes and pile them aside. He ordered the witch to design the stacking pattern of the wood and grass. He asked Ricardo to choose a horse from the remaining ponies. Although it was not as good as Drogo's mount, it was still usable. With a bitter look on his face, Adka pulled the horse to the middle of the square formed by the pile of wood, fed it a shriveled apple, and then knocked it down with an axe. The death of the horse caused a lot of commotion in the herd, and only the old, disabled and female men took a lot of effort to calm the horses. The witch watched all this uneasily. Killing the horse is not enough. She told Sigurd, blood itself is weak, and you did not recite the spell. Blood magic is not a child's play. You call me a witch, as if all this is a curse, but the true meaning of magic is wisdom. You will not succeed by doing this. Sigurd smiled at her. Woman, I know what magic is better than you. The horse and its blood are just the introduction. As for the spell. He made a bad gesture to the sky. How could I need their power? Mine is enough. The witch was silent. Her eyes became more and more uneasy. Sigurd understood what happened next without the witch's instructions. He had the horse carcass placed on a platform, and branches and trunks, as well as a large number of branches, were used to form the symbol of the rising and setting of the sun. Then he asked Dany to place the treasures on the square platform. Drogo's large tent, painted vest, saddle and reins, beloved with, and his arc and long bone now. Dany kept her bride's gift, saying that she had another use for it. Sigurd saw through her intention and nodded in approval. The Khal's treasure was covered with branches and hay. The top layer of the platform was leveled with branches as thick as fingers, and the most easily burned quilts and silk fabrics were placed on it. When all this was done, the sun had already set. Dany gathered her people. You'll be my khalasar. She said loudly, I saw slaves among you. I hereby declare that you are free. If you want to leave, no one will stop you. If you stay, you will become brothers and sisters, husband and wife. A pair of black eyes looked at her, full of vigilance. Here, I see children, women and old people. Yesterday I was still a child, today I am a woman, and tomorrow I will be old. I'll let you give your hands and hearts to me. There will always be a place for you here. She folded her hands in front of her chest and turned to face the 3 young warriors. Drogo, this long whip with a silver handle is my bride gift. I give it to you and appoint you as a knight. At the same time, I ask you to swear to be the blood of my blood, live and die with me, and protect me from danger. Drogo took the whip. Khaleesi, this is impossible. I feel ashamed to be a woman's blood guard. Or you can refuse, as long as you can defeat me. Sig stood aside. He had no intention of restraining his momentum. Go. Dany bravely stood in front of the young warrior. This dragonbone bow is my bride gift. I give it to you. The dragonbone bow is delicately crafted and taller than Dany. I appoint you as a knight and ask you to swear to be the blood of my blood, live and die with me, and protect me from danger. Agga accepted the bow. I can't swear, only men can lead khalasar, or you can appoint someone else as a knight. What's your attitude? Only the strong can refuse. Look at me, maybe you can defeat me. Sig said provocatively. Rakaro. Dany's forehead was covered with sweat. She was under a lot of pressure, but she continued bravely. This arc was my bridal gift. It was a gorgeous sword with gold thread on a blade and scabbard. I give it to you hereby appointing you as a knight and asking you to swear to be the blood of my blood, live and die with me, and protect me from danger. You are Khaleesi. Ricardo took the arc. I will ride with you to Dothrak and protect you from danger until you join the Dashkun. Beyond that, I can make no promises. Dany nodded, as if she didn't hear his answer. She turned and found the last knight, Sir Jorah Mormont. She said solemnly, you are my first follower and the most loyal knight. She looked at Sigurd on the side. He nodded in agreement. I have no bride gift to give you, but I swear to heaven that one day you will receive from me a longsword like no other in the world. The blade is forged by a real dragon, and the blade is forged at Valyrian steel. I ask you to swear allegiance to it. My queen, my life is yours. Jorah knelt on one knee and placed his sword at her feet. I swear to serve you. Until death. Dany emphasized. Until death. I will remember your oath, and I hope you will not regret it. She helped him up and tiptoed to leave a kiss on his lips. You are my first queen's guard. Dany turned to face Sig. My dear brother, are you really willing to give up the throne? As long as you are willing, everything I just did will be invalid. He responded to her with a firm look. If you promise me here, you will give up the throne forever. You will put on black robes and go to the wall in the land of the setting sun, separated from your family forever. There was nostalgia, excitement, sadness of family affection and other complex expressions in her eyes. My sister, the queen of the most powerful khalasar on the Dothraki Sea, and the queen of the Seven Kingdoms, the descendant of the dragon. He said solemnly, I will give up the throne and all the rights of the family, and pass them on to the only heir of the family, my sister, Daenerys Stormborn. I will do my best to help you regain the throne, and then go to the wall, which will become my castle, and guarding the comfort of mankind will become my duty and goal. He came to Dany and took her hand. Before that, let me help you become a true descendant of the dragon. After completing the complicated rituals of bathing and changing clothes, people brought Drogo to him. Sig took out the ancient short knife obtained from the witch and inserted it into his heart. Drogo fell down and stopped breathing immediately. The tribesmen retreated in fear. If it weren't for the mercenaries' obstruction, some people would have turned around and fled. Drogo was placed on the top of the platform, with his head facing the direction of the Holy Mother Mountain in the northeast. Then Sig picked up a little thing amid the soft screams of the maids. Wrapped in a white cloth, it was stained with blood. Dany burst into tears when she saw this thing, and Sig signaled the maids to pull her away. In his arms was Dany's child, the stillborn Roegel. Bring oil. With the altar, jars of scented oil were poured on the altar. Chapter 86 Blood Magic 7. The tribesmen carried jars of scented oil and poured them on the altar. The oil soaked the blankets, branches, dead leaves, hay, and Drogo and Roegel. The oil seeped into the wooden structure under the altar. The air was filled with fragrance. Dany had the dragon eggs brought. Jorah came to the two and said, My queen, Viserys, my lord, Drogo has no use for dragon eggs in the night realms. Why not take them to Arya and sell them? We only need one to buy a large ship and return to Pendos. Dany was unmoved and climbed onto the altar herself with the eggs. Sir Jorah, you have mistaken the purpose of eggs. Let me show you what dragon eggs can do. He patted the knight's shoulder like a brother. Sid watched Dany's every move as she placed the eggs next to her beloved Drogo. The black one was placed in his palm and held down by his palm, the green one was placed next to his head and braided, and the cream and gold one was placed between his legs. Dany kissed him goodbye, reluctant to leave. You are all crazy. The witch screamed. Sig asked the cells where to guard her and prevent her from escaping. There is sometimes only a fine line between madness and wisdom. Sig smiled and said to her, as if what was going on was just an ordinary cremation ceremony. Ser Jorah, tie the witch to the altar. Dany looked at the witch and said quietly. Tied to the altar, your majesty. Please listen to me, Ser Jorah said with difficulty, with fear written on his face. Do as I say. Dany said angrily, didn't you swear to follow my will until death? Ricardo, you come to help him. Just as the two dragged the witch to the altar, Sig stopped them. No, brother, please don't stop me. Blood magic requires life as a price. Dany was panicked and said. I know, dear Dany, I know. Sig touched her silver hair. I will deal with the price. Everything that should be done has been done, and the next step is to wait. Sig read Drogo's memory. Whenever a horseler died, his mount was killed and buried with him, so that the dead Khal could ride his horse proudly into the Night Kingdom. When the body was cremated, the Khal would ride the flaming horse and leap up, turning into a star in the sky. Look there. Drogo shouted, there. Following his direction, he saw the eastern sky. The dark red of the sunset had not yet completely faded, and a comet, with a blood-red color, pierced the sky with a dragon's tail. Dany took the torch from Adga and inserted it into the pile of wood. The incense oil immediately burned, and in a heartbeat, the flames leapt and climbed all over the altar. Small flames jumped all over the altar, moving as swiftly as red mice. The heat spread from the altar, and the tribesmen retreated one after another, until only two people were closest to the altar, Dany and Sigurd. When the heat forced Dany back, Sigurd threw his sword and money bag to the ground. He strode forward, releasing all his strength to protect Viserys' body. The fruit of life pulsed in his body, and infinite life force burst out, consumed and spread in the flames. No! Dany screamed. He stood in the flames, red rats scurrying around him, his clothes burned, his cloak turned into a cape of flames, and his shoes melted and stuck to the altar. Choking smoke and air of terrifying temperature rushed into his nostrils. The temperature of the fire stream burned his airway. All his organs and tissues on his body surface and inside his body were constantly destroyed and regenerated by the fire. The regeneration speed was so fast that from the outside, he was not affected by the fire at all. The silver hair on his head turned orange-red. He had real fiery red hair. The hair grew too fast, and he had to control the regeneration of his scalp to maintain the existing hairstyle. He turned around with difficulty, not because of pain or burning, but because of the strong adhesion of his boots after they were burned. Dany, it's your turn. He greeted her with a smile. Perhaps the image was too terrifying. He looked around and saw that everyone, including Ser Jorah and the Salzwards, was terrified and kept retreating. The Targaryens are descendants of true dragons, and true dragons are not afraid of fire. Perhaps this sentence eliminated Dany's last doubts, or she had already realized that she was not afraid of heat. She walked towards the burning altar. The flames burned Drogo and surrounded him. In an instant, he seemed to be wearing orange silk clothes. The flames stung Sig's eyes. He strengthened the power of regeneration, and as a result, the speed of hair growth exceeded the speed of burning. He now had a shoal of flaming hair. On the altar, various forces echoed each other, and the orange-red colors shot straight into the sky. The firestorm raged around the altar, and the flags in the camp snapped. The sound of wood crackling was continuous, and glowing embers rose slowly from the fireworks. The rising flames, like wings of fire, forced the people around to retreat again. Woman finally gave up rescuing Dany and avoided it. Dany stepped slowly into the flames. Unlike him, her hair and clothes turned to dust when they touched the flames. But she was not afraid of the flames, her skin was not afraid of the flames, and she walked in the fire like him, seeming to revel in the extreme beauty of the fire, her arms open to welcome the swaying flames as if they were breezes, gentle water. A gray horse painted in thick smoke rose into the air, its mane a sea of blue fire. Drogo rode the gray horse, his flaming whip in his hand. He smiled at Dany and nodded to Sigurd. With a hiss, the whip flew towards the altar, and the crackling sound was like thunder. The platform made of wood, twigs and hay began to shake and collapse inward. A tall young man appeared, and he opened his arms to Dany, as if to embrace her. Sigurd jumped up and picked up Dany to prevent her from being crushed or hurt. They were bathed in ash and sparks. Something unknown bounced on the ground and landed at their feet. It was a dragon egg flashing orange light. The eggshell had strange patterns and had cracked, and strange smoke came out from inside. The fire inexplicably intensified, and the roar shook the sky. Outside the fire, people's screams and children's surprised shouts could be heard faintly. The sound of the fire was like thunder, rolling into the distance, and the roar was like 1,000 horses galloping. The altar collapsed completely, and thick smoke rolled up, circling around the two people. The flames gathered into a pillar of fire and shot up into the sky. The horses screamed and neighed, the Dothraki were afraid and wondering, the mercenaries cursed loudly, and the Night Jor called Dany at the top of his voice. Finally, the pillar of fire combined with a strong wind to form a storm of fire, which swept the altar and everything near the altar into it. Crack, the sound of thunder was deafening, as if the sky was falling and the earth was splitting, and the end of the world was coming. The flames finally died down, and Sid carried her out of the fire, saying to Jorah, who was sitting on the ground, "Help us find some clothes, and it would be best if we could get a bigger cage, as these little guys are a little hard to control." A creamy white and golden dragon, another bronze and emerald green dragon, and a black and red dragon, they nestled and climbed around the two of them, their bright red eyes wide open, curiously looking around. The knight knelt down, and Urkaz knelt down. Drogo put his scimitar on the ground. "Blood of my blood. Blood of my blood." Agga's expression was dull, as if in a dream. Ricardo trembled and crawled on the ground. "Blood of my blood." Sid put Dany down, put on the white robe handed to her by the mercenaries, and let the gathered tribesmen worship her. He himself was wrapped in a black cloak, and said to the mercenary captain who came to him with a horrified look, "Let's go, it's time to deal with Yako. I allow you to take 10% of the spoils as revenge for the transportation." Under the mercenary's odd gaze, he put on his spare battle robe, carried the giant sword on his back, and flew on his horse. Behind him came a slender and majestic roar, the roar of the Dragon Clan, which resounded through the sky again after 100 years. Chapter 87. Preparing for the Battle of Winterfell. The north wind was howling, and the chilly morning reminded people of winter. Theon Greyjoy tried hard to put a smile back on his face. He still remembered the last winter, although he was very young at that time. The frozen corpses, the bone-chilling cold, and the panic in Pike City were unforgettable in his life. He swore that he would always keep smiling in the future. He couldn't help but feel ashamed of his cowardice. He exhaled a breath of white air, shocked that he could already see such a phenomenon. Winter is come in, and this no longer seems to be a motto. He quickly recovered and slapped his cheeks with both hands. The stinging made him pick up the courage to forget. "What are you doing?" "Some kind of trick to impress the women of love?" Rob asked behind him. He exhaled. "Well, the moves to impress women are more clever than swordsmanship, and can be called art." Turning back to face Rob, "It's a pity that you can't use it anymore, because you're the lord of the city, Rob, and you must act like a lord of the city." The two stood side by side on the top of the city wall, watching the 300 cavalry and nearly 2,000 infantry brought by the Karstark family from the city of Khal gathered in front of Winterfell. The spears of the soldiers reflected cold light under the sunlight. The ceremonial officer walking in the front beat the huge war drum, boom dot boom. The army moved slowly under the soul-stirring rhythm. "Why can't the lord of the city? I command Winterfell, and the girls of the land of Wind and Moon dare not disobey." Rob tried to pose like an adult, but still looked childish. "Didn't anyone tell you to grow more beard? Now it's like a child playing house." Rob was instantly frustrated. Hal laughed and patted his shoulder. "Overall it's not bad, but it's really inappropriate to use the majesty of the city lord to discuss the affairs of Fenyu land." Under Rob's envious gaze, Theon took out Master Lewin's bronze telescope and carefully observed the army that was gradually approaching. Erlich could lead the army himself, and he brought his sons Arion, Eddard and Thorin. The four fathers and sons were wearing helmets and armor, riding on tall war horses, and the deep black-bottomed white sun flags around them fluttered and blocked the sun. It is said that they have the blood of the Stark people in their bodies. The history of this family can be traced back hundreds of years. But from the outside, they don't look like Stark people at all. They are all very tall and strong, with sharp expressions and murderous intent. Compared with the lords guarding the north, they are more like wild people, with beards on their faces, long hair over their shoulders, and cloaks made of bear, seal or wolf skins. If they appear near the wall, they will definitely attract attacks from the Night's Watch. "This is the last batch of troops," Rob said with emotion. His expression was complicated. "The problems we worried about before have all come true. Winterhaven is overcrowded and the roads are difficult to navigate. Soldiers, their baggage, and supply vehicles are jammed together. We can't handle it with our manpower alone. There are more problems than just these." Theon sighed with him. His duty was to maintain order in Winterhaven. Yesterday, Lord Bolton's men killed one of Lord Severn's subordinates in the tavern. This morning, it was said that another Lord Servant chopped off the head of a peasant woman. If this kind of thing is not handled properly, it will cause a big commotion. Unfortunately, the lords don't understand us and insist on striving for the greatest interests for the guy who caused the accident. Robert sighed. "Little Bran is also a worry. As soon as he saw me, he pestered me to come outside the city to see." The two looked at each other and sighed together. The sun was blocked by dark clouds, and the weather seemed to be colder. "By the way, we will host a banquet for the Glover family and the Lord of the Dreadfort at noon and evening respectively. Don't confuse the family emblem with a name. Robert said lightly. Theon frowned. My lord, shouldn't you be the one to have dinner with the lords to enhance the relationship? He looked round uncertainly. Why should I be involved? Robb pulled him along the bridle path on the city wall. You are my trusted brother. Theon loved to hear this, but he didn't like to hear Robb say it. Every time this guy said this, it was always bad news. But you see, there are so many lords, Winterfell can't hold them all, let alone entertain them all at the same time. He opened his strong arms and hugged his shoulders. My mission is to entertain Countess Mormont, to appease the Hornwood family, and to discuss logistics with Lord Salwyn. Just hearing these names, Theon felt his scalp tingling. And Lord Tallheart and the Wild Leagues of Umber, they are already impatient. I can't let little Brent deal with them. Theon nodded with difficulty. It is indeed not easy to be the lord of the city, especially these subordinates of Lord Eddard, who are all arrogant. When he saw them, he was reminded of the more stubborn people in the Iron Islands. Okay, just treat it as an experience for inheriting the family business in the future. He promised Robb with a wry smile. We have too few knights. Robb seemed to want to change the subject and said as he walked. They were heading to the city gate, where Robb would have a fierce hug with Lord Karstark. Even if we count what Karstark bought today, the number of knights would not exceed 400. But we have no less than 4,000 lancers. Theon encouraged Robb. With free riders and mounted archers, our cavalry may exceed 6,000. He put away the bronze telescope. This is a treasure that Robb has coveted for a long time. He must not beat him of the chance to take it away. We northern nobles do not believe in the 7 gods. Few people can accept the rituals of watching the night on the Great September and anointing with holy oil. Naturally, there are few nominal knights. But war is a competition of combat power. Horsemen are no worse than real knights. They will also pierce the enemy with their lances. Robb nodded and agreed with his point of view. Theon was still full of doubts about the difficulties he was about to face. The two approached the city gate, and Robb stopped talking. He was no longer the familiar look of Theon. He held his chin high and his sharp eyes kept shooting out. This is the attitude of Lord Robert. Although he is still not as mature as Lord Eddard, he has surpassed most of his peers. Theon has some strengths in military affairs, which is praised by Lord Eddard and Maester Luwin. Although his riding skills are not good and his swordsmanship is average, he is accurate and fast with a bow and arrow. If personal martial arts can only represent his ability as a general, then map reading, strategic layout, and the accuracy of supply calculation can be called the talent of a commander. According to his estimation, Winterfell has reached its limit, and Robert must use troops as soon as possible. If nothing else, just a few days later, the nobles in the north may collapse on their own. Winterhaven is overcrowded, and the food supply capacity of the castle and the surrounding areas is almost at its limit. In addition, there will be knights from the Barrowlands, Marshlanders, and the troops of Lord Manderley and Earl Flint joining along the way. It will be too late to act after the troops have eaten up all the food in the city. The army of the north must set out immediately, and the sooner the better. These are just the internal situation. From the outside, the war is spreading. The nobles of Riverrun, the biggest support of the northern families in the Three Rivers, were fighting bloody battles. Even for them, the troops must set off immediately. Theon no longer thought about anything else. Robb joined the guards and waited at the gate of the inner city. Recently, the troops have been frequently dispatched. Robb ordered the gates between the inner city and the outer city to be open and the drawbridges to be lowered. A team of heavily armed lancers crossed the moat. The front of the team has entered the inner city, and the tail is dragging far outside the city. They are the army of the Karstark family. Lord Karstark is entering the city. The Karstark lancers, wearing black half-helmets, black wool cloaks with white sunburst family emblems, riding tall war horses, are majestic. The cavalry passed by Robb. They were all strong and brave, and seemed not to buy into the account of Lord Robert. No one saluted when they passed by. Robb did not scold them, but whistled. Greyjoy ran over from the other end of the square, his eyes golden as fire. The horses rolled their eyes, Nathan screamed, and many of them stood up on their front hoofs. The fierce lancers had to work hard to maintain their balance. In addition, they were in the queue, and several knights could not avoid it and fell off their horses. Theon understood and winked at the guards around him. Everyone laughed loudly, unscrupulously to the extreme. Lord Karstark calmed his mount while scolding the servants around him for being useless. A distinguished guest has arrived, you are all laughing, shut up. This is the effect that Robb wanted. Although it was mostly acting, the effect was proven to be effective. Theon was very proud of his strategy. Lord Karstark was shocked and doubtful, but he did not dare to neglect it. He dismounted with his sons and walked quickly. Robb greeted them with a smile on his face. Chapter 88. Bad news. You will know when the day comes. His father's advice when he was a child is still ringing in his ears. This truth belonging to the Iron Islands has been fulfilled in the feuding Winterfell. Theon does not think that he has any hatred with the Starks. Although the Greyjoys and most of the families in the Iron Islands have lost relatives and friends because of the Starks. But he is different. He has been hanging out with the Stark children since he was a child. He knows them like brothers, or even better than brothers. His analogy is Robert and Ned. This has always been what Theon is proud of, and he dreams that one day he can have such a friendship with Robert and make a career side by side. He tries not to think about his old father and his fat sister who looks like a boy. In his impression, the Iron Islands are dark and Pike is full of hostility. Only a small part of his heart belongs there, really just a little bit. Winterfell is very big, and the Stark Castle is not small either. It is said that it is even bigger than the Red Keep and King's Landing. Now the castle is overcrowded. The sound of swords and axes clashing was heard everywhere. The carriage rolled through the mud, and the barking of hounds was everywhere, mixed with the howling of dire wolves, and then the wailing of ordinary dogs. The blacksmith shop opened its doors, and the armory was also busy. The castle blacksmith and his apprentices had not rested for several days. They worked day and night, and their bodies were sweating profusely. He bet that when Robert came, there was not such a big scene. These days are extremely chaotic. Everyone is exhausted physically and mentally, and the Stark kids are also worrying. Little Brad always rides Hunter around and asks questions. It is understandable that he wants to go to war with Robb. But the battlefield is really not a place for children to play house, not to mention that he is already disabled. In the ever-changing Killing Land, if Robb still has to distract himself to care about his disabled brother, there is really no need to fight the war. It is better to surrender to Lord Tywin directly. Another troublesome little guy is Rickon. On the day he learned that Robb was going to lead the army, he went crazy and violent like the legendary winter snowstorm. The little guy was emotionally unstable, crying and throwing tantrums and beating people repeatedly. On the second day, he took his dire wolf shad dog to hide in the dungeon and weighed the dead king's rusty sword. The damn black wolf, with green eyes, provoked Rickon. The two things together are the devil. They injured Gage's hand and tore the flesh off Mycon's leg. In the end, Robert Greyjoy came out to subdue the two crazy things. Now the black wolf is locked in the kennel, and little Rickon cries even more fiercely. The dogs are unwilling to go back to the kennel, which makes Theon very anxious. There are basically two opinions on whether Robb should go out in person. The people led by Maester Luwin thought that the only purpose of sending troops now is to defend the neck and assist River Run against the Lannisters, as long as Robb handed over the power to Halloran or Theon, or even any of the northern lords. Theon belonged to another faction. Although he wanted to lead the army, he still had a sense of the overall situation. If Robb did not lead the army himself, he would lose his prestige. Just imagine who would work for a kid who could only hide in the thick walls of Winterfell. Especially the lords of the north were all arrogant and unscrupulous. The reason they did not betray was out of their sense of responsibility and honor to Lord Eddard, not respect for Robb. Theon had studied the art of war, and he knew very well how fragile it was to rely solely on the sense of responsibility and honor of his subordinates. A strong leader was needed to truly make an organization strong. Robb must be strong, and the two discussed this repeatedly many times. Even though Robb had made preparations in advance and Theon had provided him with the best strategies, Lord Eddard's vassals still noticed the fact that Robb was just an underage boy. Most of them tested Robert in their own ways. Lord Roosburton asked for leadership in a rude tone. Lord Robert, though smiling, tested Robert in a more sinister way. Maggie Mormont, with grey hair and as strong as a man, compared Robert to her grandson without giving him face. She also emphasized that she just happened to have a granddaughter of the right age to marry Robert. The seemingly gentle and respectable Earl Severn even brought his plain-looking, 30-year-old daughter to the table. Lord Hornwood, who seemed the friendliest, sent gifts every day. Today it was a horse, tomorrow it was venison, and the day after tomorrow it was a silver sword. This lord who seemed to be asking for nothing in return actually had a big appetite. He proposed a small piece of fiefdom that his grandfather had once owned, the hunting rights on the back of a certain ridge, and even the right to build a dam on the White Knife River. On the surface, he wanted Robert to be happy, but in fact, he put a lot of pressure on Robert. Robb was very calm and polite, just like Lord Eddard, dealing with the relationship with the lords one by one. Theon admired him for this. The boy who was usually reckless actually used his brain to think at this time. The real test came from the Earl of Umber. Their lord was a giant called Greyjoy, who was similar in size to Hodor, but much stronger than Hodor. He spoke rudely and claimed that he would never walk behind the army of the Hornwoods and the Sevens, otherwise he would first crush these losers and continue to march. Robb laughed and said that he was welcome to do so, because his central army could use the excuse of suppressing the rebellion to deal with the army of the Umber family, and then find him and his son and hang them on the king's road as traitors. The great John cursed and started smashing wine jars. Harris Morant tried to dissuade him but was thrown out of the dining room. Great John drew out the huge sword of terrifying size, and his son and subordinates jumped up one after another, with their weapons unsheathed. At this time, Theon was also very nervous. He was not sure whether his arrows, even if they hit the vital points of these giants, could really take away their fighting power. If they were hit by the weapons in their hands, or even just hit by the huge fists, it was unimaginable what the consequences would be. Grey Wind, who had been waiting for a long time, was dispatched. The direwolf roared with a terrifying roar, and it pounced on the great Euron and bit off 2 of his fingers. My father taught me to kill anyone who dared to draw a sword before swearing allegiance to the Lord. At this time, Robb was like a god, and Theon simply didn't recognize him. But I believe you just want to help me cut meat. As for why such clever words came out of the mouth of a reckless man, Theon was puzzled. The great Euron struggled to get up, comforted his sons and his subordinates, and set the bloody broken fingers with his mouth while laughing. Your meat is too fucking hard. After this, the great Euron became Robb's right-hand man and Robb's most staunch supporter. He also boasted to everyone that the young Lord Robb was a true Stark descendant, and if anyone disagreed, it would be against him, the great John. When the 2 were left, Robb was pale and trembling. Theon admired his quick thinking and was determined to make a career with Robb. Countless bad news came one after another. First, there were news from travelers, crows and official documents. It was difficult to tell whether it was true or false, and there were many doubts. Some said that everyone Lord Stark but was killed, and the heads of Northerners were stuck on the spear points of the Red Castle. There was also news that Lord Eddard killed Robert and made himself king. There was also information about the Baratheon army besieging King's Landing and the Prime Minister could not hold it alone. A free writer swore that he saw Lord Eddard leave King's Landing and flee to the South High Garden with Lord Renly. The rest were all terrible but not very credible news. Arya and Sansa were killed by the hounds around Joffrey, Lady Stark killed Tyrion and hung the dwarf's body on River Run, and Lord Tywin marched to the area, burning, killing and looting along the way. Even more outrageous was the rumor that Robert had returned from the dead and was recruiting troops on Dragonstone. The most shocking and credible news came from Sansa's handwritten letter, which was stamped with Lord Eddard's seal. The letter said that Lord Eddard had conspired with the king's 2 brothers to usurp the throne. King Robert was dead and Joffrey succeeded him. In the letter, she urged Robb and Lady Stark to go to King's Landing to swear allegiance, and at the end of the letter, she mentioned that as long as the Starks swore allegiance to Joffrey and expressed their loyalty, she would ask King Joffrey to spare Lord Eddard's life after marrying him. Robb was very angry for another reason. Sansa's letter did not mention Arya. May Esther Lewin emphasized that the letter was the Queen speaking through the little girl's mouth. But Theon thought of the ominous legend. The legend about the Stark family. All those who go south will not have a good ending. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novellas. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 89. The army sets out. The day when the body of Lady was brought back reminded Theon of the ominous legend, and everything that happened afterwards seemed to confirm the legend. This little wolf was the most docile and well-behaved of the direwolves, and was very similar to Sansa's personality. Unexpectedly, the first one to leave was not the wild and unruly Shadow Dog, but her. The guards who escorted the remains back said that Arya had a conflict with the prince, and the queen forced the duke to kill Lady on the grounds that the little wolf was a threat to the prince. Fortunately, Jory and his men let Mary go first, otherwise the bodies of 2 direwolves would be brought back. The guards told Master Lewin not to mention the little wolf in the letter, so as to prevent Sansa from knowing that her wolf was dead. Theon thought he was a realistic person. Although he would pray to the gods, he really believed in himself. He was quite proud of this. But on the day when the remains of Lady were returned, the sky was grey, and before the visitors walked across the drawbridge, Grey Wind, Summer and Shadow Dog began to whine. The long, mournful night caused all the animals in Winterfell to feel uneasy. The hounds barked non-stop, the horses trembled in panic, and everything seemed to be doomsday. He had to believe that perhaps there was truth in the saying that there was a will of heaven. In the shadow of the Starks' castle in Winterfell, there was an ancient cemetery, and almost every stone tablet was covered with pale lichens. From the time of the King of Winter, or even earlier eras, the King of the North had placed the remains of his loyal followers here. Robb buried the lady here in accordance with Lord Eddard's letter, and her brothers wandered around the cemetery anxiously. She followed the team to the south, and when she returned, only the bones were left. Isn't this also a reflection of the ominous legend? Theon forgot who heard this ominous legend from. No one would mention it openly, but everyone would know it and think of it in due time. Lord Eddard's father, Lord Rickard the Elder, went south, along with his son, Lord Eddard's brother Brandon, and 200 elite warriors under the old duke. But no one returned. Similarly, Lord Eddard went south, taking Sansa and Arya with him, Jory, Houlihan, Fatom, and more elite warriors, almost emptying Winterfell. Then Lady Stark and Sir Roderick followed south. So far, no one has returned except for 4 warriors who escorted the remains. The news from King's Landing, even if only part of it is true, shows that most of the people who went south have turned into remains, and even many of their heads are poking at the spears of the Red Keep. The army set out, and unfortunate news followed one after another. What Theon thought of was that Robb would also lead people south, and bring more elite northerners, including himself. They went south not to swear allegiance, but to hold swords in hand and kill all the way to King's Landing. This time, they were not facing ordinary bandits, but the shrewd Lord Tywin Lannister and the confusing political situation in the Seven Kingdoms. How many people could come back alive? 2 days later. It was a rare good weather recently. The pink morning light of the morning glow dyed the sky red. The strong wind blew away the thin clouds in the sky. The army was about to set out. Robb rode a long-haired grey horse, his shield hung on one side, made of oak, with an iron edge on the outside, and the emblem of the roaring direwolf was engraved on the grey and white shield. He himself was wearing a bleached leather vest, covered with silver grey mail, a long sword hanging on his waist, and a grey-white fur-rimmed cloak. He was majestic and arrogant. What a young hero. Theon looked at himself. Although he was also wearing a mail cloak, on the dark sea, the family emblem of the golden sea monster was not much inferior to the direwolf, but he was not as majestic as Robb. He consoled himself in his heart that he played a supporting role among the brothers of different surnames. When the bards sang praises to Robb in the future, they would definitely mention him. Robb was mighty, and he represented wisdom and reason. For some reason, he was not satisfied with such an explanation. Robb ordered little Bran to take over the duties of the city lord temporarily. The poor little guy was uneasy. Little Rickon refused to go downstairs. Robb was a little depressed, but he quickly cheered up and told Bran, "Father will be back soon. I promise you that I will bring father back too." Robb turned his horse's head and ran away quickly, followed by a grey wind. His action became the signal for the army to set out. With Harris Moran as the leader, holding high the grey-white flag of the Stark family, the others followed in 2 columns with cavalry as the priority, and left the city from the south gate in a mighty manner. The large group of people and horses advanced to the low and deep rhythm of the war drums, with flags fluttering and the tips of their spears reflecting the sunlight, which was dazzling. Cheers resounded through the sky, and the people and infantrymen on both sides of the road sent them off. For a time, the morale of the team was high and the people were excited. However, Theon was unexpectedly disappointed. He realized that this was all the glory of the Stark family, and as an outsider, no one would ever cheer for him. The remains of the high walls and towers in the Kaling Bay have become the symbol of this place. Basalts as huge as ordinary houses are distributed in the mud. The ground here is soft swamps and muddy ponds. In ancient times, there were fortifications like the high walls of Winter City, but now they have become dilapidated monuments and abandoned in the mud. The once wooden castle had rotted and collapsed thousands of years ago, and only 3 high towers remained. Theon learned from Master Luwin that there used to be 20 defense towers stationed at Kaling Bay. The gate tower is located in the middle, and there are even several feet high walls next to it. The drunkard tower is stuck on the edge of the swamp and has tilted quite badly. It will not be surprising when it falls down, just like a real drunkard. The tower of the Sons of the Forest lacks a spire. According to legend, during the ancient wars, the Sons of the Forest summoned their nameless gods from it and inflicted terrible damage on the ancestors. Now it looks like a dilapidated wreckage, half buried in the mud. The 3 dilapidated towers are covered with moss. A giant tree grows out of the gap in the wall behind the gate tower. Its roots strangely surround the entire area of the 3 towers, like a naturally generated wall. The 3 towers are occupied by the Stark team, the Drunken Tower by the Karstarks, and the Sons of the Forest Tower by the Umbers. The headquarters is located in the gate tower. Theon likes to look at the entire Kaling Bay from the gate tower. It is distant and silent, and has a decadent and silent beauty under the setting sun. The military strategist in him appreciates this place not only because of the beautiful scenery. This is a real death trap and a barrier to the north. If you just think this is a ruin, any commander who has just arrived will be in trouble. The Bay of Kaling is much easier to defend than it seems. The 3 remaining towers control the King's Road from 3 directions, and this is also the only way to the north. It's not that there are no other paths available, but the carriages, horses, and supplies, the necessities of the army, can only pass through here. Even if the army's scouts want to bypass the three towers and go north alone, they must be prepared to fight against swamps, quicksand, and pits, not to mention the common venomous snakes here, which is simply impossible to defend against. If the army heading north wants to attack any of the towers, they must pass through the mud that is as deep as an adult's waist, cross the moat where venomous snakes and lizard lions are infested, and then climb the slippery walls. This process is so terrifying that it must also endure the firepower of the archers and catapults of the three towers. If these are not enough to deter the attackers, then after nightfall, the legend that the ghosts of the north suck the blood of the southerners will greatly undermine the morale of the outsiders. If Lannister gets carried away and plans to send a large army to attack Winterfell, this will be the best place for the army to die. The sound of the horn is melodious and rhythmic, warning that there are outsiders. The smoke of war has not yet risen, which means that the newcomers may be friends rather than enemies. A group of knights set out from the Forest Children Tower, with the flag of lumber flying. Theon stared into the distance, which was the direction of the horn. Who could arrive at this time? The most likely one is Sir Willis, who has already sent people to swear allegiance and said that they will send 200 cavalry and about 1,300 infantry. Although these troops are not strong, they represent the influence of the Stark family, and they are unbreakable even if they come to the neck. Another possibility is that it is the defeated army from Riverrun. If that is the case, it will be bad. The Riverlands have many soldiers and generals, sufficient food and weapons, and high defense. Once they retreat, although the northern army does not expect the southerners to attack the neck, it will not be so easy to march into King's Landing. Just breaking through the enemy's defense line in Riverrun is a headache. After a while, the short and melodious sound of the horn sounded again, and Theon frowned. It was true that the people coming were friendly troops, but judging from the number of times the horn sounded, it seemed that there were not only one group of lords, but also three groups of troops gathering here. He really couldn't think of who else would join here besides Willis's army and the army of Riverrun. Chapter 90 The Lady Returns. The antechamber of the Gate Tower, as the headquarters of the Northern Army, was brightly lit day and night. Tonight, as usual, the dinner was still accompanied by a military meeting, and the lords of all important families were summoned to attend. Theon, as Robb's right-hand man, recorded everyone's opinions in the meeting. The Great Yuan guided everyone to move closer to Robb's ideas, or raise Robb's dissent. As long as Robb didn't speak up himself, there was still room for maneuver. As a leader, Robb put on the airs of Lord Eddard, always listening and thinking deeply, but never expressing his opinions easily. Everyone gathered around a stone table, and all kinds of maps and papers covered the table. A stove was lit in the room to drive away the cold. The fragrant food was placed on the coffee table next to it, and no one asked about it. When she arrived, the Great Yuan was arguing fiercely with Roose Bolton about the army's route of advance. Grey Wind, who was lying by the fire, was the first to notice her. Grey Wolf stood up suddenly, staring at the door with his golden eyes. The discussion paused, and the room suddenly became very quiet. Robb looked up. Mother. Lord Robb disappeared, and the questioner was a child who was not yet an adult. Lady Stark seemed to want to hug Robb. She opened her arms, but quickly put them down. Grey Wind walked straight across the hall in the crowd, went to her side, and rubbed his head against the back of her hand affectionately. You have a beard. The lady greeted him formally, as if there was a gap between the two of them suddenly. Robb touched his beard uncomfortably. Yes, but I'm not used to it yet. Both of them had red hair, and Robb's beard was redder than his hair. You're very good like this. Her expression was serious, not like a mother. In fact, Theon felt that her attitude and demeanor were very stiff, as if a noble duchess was facing a knight. Looks very much like Riverrun, my brother Edmure. Grey Wind ran away. Sir Herman Tallheart greeted her first. He knelt on one knee, took her hand, and gently pressed his forehead against the back of her hand. My dear lady, he said in a voice that sounded like a chant, it is better to see you as beautiful as you are. Then came Lords Gaebert and Robert, and then Great Yuan. And a large number of vassals and lords who had heard the news from outside and joined in. Everyone came forward to greet him one after another, and the degree of respect exceeded that of Robb, as if Lord Eddard had come in person. Theon waited for the opportunity. He came to the lady last and knelt on one knee like the other adults. The world is unpredictable. I didn't expect to see you here. No one could have expected it. Her eyes were gentle, but not the gentleness that Theon wanted to treat a child. I landed at White Harbor and met Lord Wyman, and then I learned that the army had already set out. I changed my mind and came here at the last minute. You should know Lord Wyman's son, Sir Wendell. Wendell Manderley then came up and bowed deeply. Just looking at his bloated appearance, you can imagine how much effort such etiquette would take for the lord. Then Lady Stark introduced the famous Blackfish to everyone. "This is my uncle, Sir Brandon. He just left the Vale of Arryn to fight for the North." "Thank you for joining us, Sir Brandon." Robb responded to the Blackfish's courtesy. "Your bravery is what we need most right now. Sir Wendell, I'm glad to have your help." Robb looked behind his mother in confusion. "I wonder if Sir Rodriguez is with you. I miss him very much and need his help. I appoint him as the acting Lord of Winterfell." Lady Stark's response was like a subordinate treating a superior. Her transformation was seamless, and Theon only noticed the clues because he was too familiar with them. "Master Luwin is knowledgeable, but he is not a knight and is not good at war. Sir Rodriguez just makes up for his shortcomings. My lady, you don't have to worry." The great yawn was as loud as ever, and Theon really wanted to rush up and cover his mouth. "There can be no war in Winterfell. It won't take long. We will beat the Lannisters to a pulp. Please forgive my rudeness. We will then fight our way to the Red Keep and rescue Lord Eddard. My lady, I have a question for you." Roose Bolton's voice was small and steady, but when he spoke, even the great Jon would listen carefully. Lord Bolton's eyes were very light in color, which had a disturbing effect. "It is said that you have arrested Lord Tywin's youngest son. I hope you have brought him here. I guarantee on the Dreadfort that I will make good use of the lovely dwarf." His tone was dangerous and intriguing. What surprised Theon was that Lady Stark looked embarrassed. "I am so sorry, my lords." She chose her words carefully. "It is true that I arrested a little devil, but unfortunately, he is no longer in my hands." The lords whispered to each other, and there was a constant stream of surprise and gasps. "My lords." The lady showed an angry look for the first time after she came in. "This is beyond my ability. It may be the will of the gods in heaven, coupled with the folly of my sister, Lady Lysa." Lady Stark said angrily. This was the first time Theon saw this capable lady behave like this. In his memory, the lady had never acted like this, not to mention that the matter involved her sister, another duchess who held real power. Then the hall was in chaos, and more lords were eager to know the exact situation. Many people turned their attention to the Vale of Arryn, and some even ran directly to the Blackfish to inquire about the Vale Kingdom's military arrangements. Theon considered whether to help the lady maintain order, but saw the lady raise her hand. The hall immediately became quiet. "Many things can be discussed later. I am very tired now. I just want to borrow the Lord Robb of you to say a few words. Please forgive me, my lords." The great yawn called the lords to leave with a loud voice, and he himself led the way. Theon cursed the flatterer in his heart. "Theon, you too." Lady Stark's politeness hurt him. After all, he was not a Stark child. He tried to smile and bowed to leave the hall. As soon as he left the hall, Sir Brandon the Blackfish came to him. "Sir Theon, I've heard of you a long time ago." The hoarse voice made people frown, but this tall lord wearing heavy armor, with a weathered face and grey hair had a special attraction and affinity. "Hello, Sir Brandon, I have heard of you for a long time." He smiled. "I heard that you have been serving in the bloody gate of the Vale of Arryn. I wonder how many troops the Vale Kingdom has sent to help this time." Like other lords, Theon was eager to know the attitude of the Vale of Arryn. After all, the Root Stark family had a close relationship with the Arryn family. It was self-evident which side they would lean towards. However, now that Lord Arryn had passed away, the Vale of Arryn had been keeping its troops inactive, which made people feel suspicious. As the Guardian of the East, Lord Arryn commands a large army. Their attitude can be said to directly determine the direction of the current situation. Blackfish shook his head and sighed. "I'm not sure whether to tell the truth, but the truth cannot be hidden," he said in an angry tone. Theon seemed to have a glimpse of the old knight's character from his attitude. Lysa emphasized that everything in the Vale of Arryn must serve to protect young Lord Robert. She will not send a single soldier. Doesn't she know that once the Lannisters defeat Riverrun, they can directly threaten the Vale of Arryn? The area is easy to defend and difficult to attack. It doesn't need so many troops at all. Theon knew from Blackfish's expression that Lady Lysa was obviously unwilling to listen to any advice. He finally understood why Lady Stark described Lady Lysa as foolish. "Child," Blackfish asked in a magnetic and hoarse voice, "can you tell me what you know about the war in the river? I'm in the Vale of Arryn, and the news is very isolated. Lady Lysa doesn't want the people below to know too much about the outside world." Theon nodded in understanding, feeling really sorry for Blackfish. He must have wanted to know the situation in his hometown. "I heard that he left Riverrun because he didn't want to settle for Lord Hoster's arranged marriage." This knight who became famous in the Battle of the Nin Copper King revealed his true character everywhere. To be honest, Theon sympathized with him but didn't agree with him. As a noble, he had to pay a price for enjoying fine clothes and delicious food since childhood. There was no reason to talk about it. If he was in Brendan's position, he would definitely not oppose the marriage, even if the woman he was arranged to marry was ugly, as long as it was good for the family. What was there to hesitate about? The war on the River Run is not going well. Please be mentally prepared, my lord. Blackfish frowned, and the deep vertical marks between his eyebrows were like knife carvings. Chapter 91. Battle of Aegean. Tell me everything you know about the Riverlands. Blackfish's expression was serious, and Theon felt his attitude, as if Lord Eddard had given an order and he had to answer. About 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks ago, in the direction of the Golden Tooth, there was a great battle between the river nobles and the Lannisters. Theon chose his words carefully, afraid to let out the words he usually used when talking about the river nobles. He believed that Blackfish would not want to hear those descriptions. Lord Edmure ordered Vance and Piper to defend the pass. The Lannister army was led by the King-Eater. They were extremely brave. Vance died, and Piper led the defeated army to retreat to River Run. As for Jaime Lannister, he led his army in pursuit. Theon paused and observed Blackfish's expression. He couldn't see through this man. The bad news is not just that. It is said that Lord Tywin personally led a large army and approached River Run in a roundabout way, and his troops are more elite and powerful. Blackfish touched his chin with his hand. He did not show a sad or gloating expression, but instead a look of repeated consideration. Before Lord Eddard was arrested, he sent a team of men under the King's banner to stop the Lannister advance. Theon pondered the information doubtfully. To be honest, he still didn't understand why Lord Eddard would take this step. Sending out a team of men without any reason would not help at all based on his understanding of Lord Tywin. The leader of the team is a southern young man. It doesn't matter what his name is. Lord Eddard also sent other knights and a team of his own guards. It is obvious that the Lannisters do not take the king seriously. They were attacked by the Lannisters when they crossed the river, and Baratheon's crown and stag flag were trampled on. The team retreated all the way and were eventually caught up by the mountain after crossing the Mummersford. It is said that most of them died in the battle, and those who were not dead were taken prisoner. Does the Lannister army have harassed the troops? Blackfish's eyes narrowed, flashing with light. Well, there should be. At least the fact that the whole team sent by Lord Eddard was annihilated is a good indication of the problem. Theon felt like he was being tested by a teacher. According to our analysis, Lord Tywin sent troops to burn, kill and loot along the King's Road. Sure enough, it's not good news. Blackfish's reaction was much calmer than Theon had imagined. What are you doing here? Are you planning to wait for the enemy to tire themselves out? He judged that Blackfish didn't really think so, and couldn't help but feel frustrated at being underestimated. Of course not. He smiled and told Blackfish angrily, we don't think they will go north. He emphasized his opinion with gestures, just in case. Robb sent someone to send a letter to the Swamplanders. If the Lannisters plan to use the swamp, they will be in trouble. Howland Reed will let them know that heavy equipment is useless there. Theon stopped and looked at the hull of the city gate tower. The mother and son seemed to be still having a long conversation. How he wished he could join them. After all, an adopted son is also half a son. Lord Tywin is very smart. He will never cross the swamp. Blackfish asserted. My lord, what do you think it will do? Blackfish smiled. If I were him, I would definitely move around the Three Rivers region, destroy the castles of the river lords one by one, and isolate River Run. Blackfish's response surprised Theon. If the Northern Army really waits for the Lannisters to attack, they are really fools. Theon wanted to refute and laugh at the other party, but he knew in his heart that Blackfish was right. Brendan caught up with the results of the Northern Lords' discussion for half a month with just one speech. We think so too, so he planned to go south and take the initiative to attack. There must be someone who disagrees. Moat Cailin is easy to defend and difficult to attack, and can resist 10 times the number of enemies. Theon was shocked. He originally planned to put the secret of Moat Cailin last to test whether Blackfish was really as powerful as the rumors said. Now it seems that the other party knows everything. Then again, such people are rare among the Northern Lords. You have more people like Greyjoy. Theon could only smile bitterly. Blackfish had guessed it right. The truth was even worse. The lords were eager to fight, and more importantly, the shortage of food and supplies did not allow them to station their troops and advance slowly. We are waiting for Lord Manderly's army. Now that they are here, the only way out is to advance. Theon said bitterly, war is a tough job. People will come when the princes and lords give orders. Free knights and mercenaries are a minority. Most of them are farmers, tenants, shepherds, businessmen, leather workers, etc. These people are not soldiers, and it is impossible for them to fight for their lords all the time. He bets that some people will want to go home as soon as they set out. Homesickness will spread as the days of Kharazim increase. He didn't know why he complained to the old knight he had just met. "We must move forward and win. I can't imagine what will happen if the war doesn't go as we wish. It's right to move forward." Blackfish nodded, his voice comforting. "The question is where to march to and what goal to achieve." Theon sighed. "That's the problem. Great Yuan thinks we should attack Lord Tywin directly." He remembered the days when the lords quarreled over the direction of the march. It was unbearable to look back. But Lord Glover and Lord Karstark opposed it. They thought that the best option was to avoid Lord Tywin's main force and join Lord Edmure in the river. Blackfish looked at the ground, as if there was a military map on the mud. "We must make sure." He turned to look at Theon with a firm attitude. "Please persuade Robb that a decision must be made. This is not a question of right or wrong. The lords hate the lords' hesitation. We must give them direction and let them vent their anger. Otherwise." Blackfish narrowed his eyes, and Theon seemed to see what Blackfish pointed to, the day when the army fell apart. Theon knew it was too early to tell Blackfish that, but he was willing to believe him. He pulled Blackfish to the side of the mud, and the two of them squatted down like ordinary soldiers. A simple military sketch quickly took shape under his dagger. "Actually, we have two plans, and we can't tell which one is better for now." He first wrote it to a plan. "You see, if we bypass Lord Tywin, we may be caught in a pincer attack by the two Lannister armies. But a head-on battle is not good either. Not only do they have more soldiers and generals, the number of their knights far exceeds ours, and Lord Tywin is experienced. He has probably participated in quite a few wars. It must be difficult to find his flaws in a head-on conflict." Blackfish didn't speak, and Theon felt that he was encouraging him to continue. "The other plan is more risky. Robert intends to allocate a small number of troops to defend the moat Kaling, with archers as the core and some infantry. The entire army will march south." Theon waved his arm vigorously, drawing a straight line on the mud. "After crossing the neck, the troops will be divided into two routes. The infantry will go along the King's Road to engage the Lannisters, and the cavalry will cross the Green Fort from the Twins." He said this with excitement as if he had won a battle. "When Lord Tywin comes into contact with our infantry, he will definitely engage the main force in battle. At that time, the main force of our cavalry can go straight to River Run from the west bank of the Green Fork." Blackfish was surprisingly quiet, neither praising nor rejecting. He just repeatedly drew on the sketch in the mud with a branch. "You put a big river between the armies. Let's put a big river between the King and Tywin," Theon emphasized. "There is no ferry crossing the Green Fork in this area. The only place to cross the river is the Twins, which is the castle of Lord Frey, a vassal of Lord Holster. Late Lord Frey." Blackfish said disdainfully, "If you pin your hopes on him." Blackfish did not continue to speak, and shook his head to express his attitude. As if to ease the atmosphere, Blackfish changed the subject himself. "I guess Lord Robert will command the cavalry, so who will command the infantry?" "Of course it's the Great Yuan. He has always emphasized that he must fight Lord Tywin head-on and beat him so hard that he even shits out gold." Theon smiled reluctantly. Blackfish did not smile at all. "I don't know the characteristics of the Northern Lords, but the Great Yuan should be the bravest among them. Of course, it is said that they have the blood of giants." Theon said proudly, and then he realized something. "Do you think it's inappropriate? The Eastwood army is the barrier between Lord Tywin and Winterfell. Do you intend to entrust the fate of Winterfell to the God of Destiny? What will you do if the Great Yuan is defeated in one battle?" Theon scratched his head. "Well, I'm not Robb, but I'm willing to convey your opinions on this matter." Chapter 92. Searching for Arya. 1. Time goes back to the day after Lord Eddard was arrested. Violet said goodbye to Joffrey. His eyes were full of reluctance. He didn't want her to leave, and emphasized that he would use the gold cloaks to search for her. She almost agreed to him. Her worry about Arya and her fear of the development of the situation made her harden her heart. "You're the king now, no one can hurt you," she hugged him, and he hugged her tightly, refusing to let go. "Remember what I taught you every day. The Queen Mother and the people around her are blinded by power. Myrcella and Tommen are inexperienced. Try to make your own judgment and try hard." She shook him off coldly, and her abandoned puppy eyes made her heart bleed. She walked away quickly without looking back, and the Red Cloaks hurriedly made way. Violet got on the horse and crossed the drawbridge of the Red Keep. In the dry moat covered with spikes, several poor people were nailed to death there, and the servants were trying to get the bodies out. Whether it was the gold robe or the red cloak, they all looked at her with fear, and no one stopped her. In this troubled time, there were rumors in King's Landing, including the rumor that the new King Joffrey killed the family of the former Prime Minister for her. Joffrey did not deliberately clarify the facts, and even his mother's questioning of their relationship made him furious. His thoughts were obvious. She could not respond to him. She belonged to Sig. The situation was urgent, and the most worrying thing was Arya. From the seriously injured Syrio, it was learned that the little girl took advantage of the chaos to escape from the back hall, and no one saw her again. She dismounted in front of the Prime Minister's tower with an expressionless face. The guard saluted her and watched her walk into the hall. Go straight to the back hall where the little girl practiced sword. It was a small, fresh air, and a good place to see the dock. Several cats lazily lay on the bay window to bask in the sun. She seemed to see the scenes of wooden swords clashing, master and apprentice sparring, and the funny scene of a little girl standing on one leg on the handrail at the entrance of the stairs, wrestling from time to time, and a girl attacking kittens and conducting life-and-death training in various places in the tower of the Prime Minister. All this, against the backdrop of the bloody scene the day before, seemed like a dream that had never happened. The ground was in a mess, with the remains of wooden swords and bloodstains scattered on it. Violet collected her thoughts and calmed down. She imagined herself as Arya, witnessing her master fighting the king's guard with a wooden sword for his life. She didn't want to escape at first, and insisted on staying to fight side by side with the Braavos people. If she really did that, the consequences would be disastrous. After all, she was not yet grown up, and her opponent was Sir Maraine, who was cruel and powerful. Syrio didn't want the girl to be hurt, so he would do everything he could to get her to leave. She had nowhere to escape, so she had to take another exit. Violet followed the girl's running route and rushed through the kitchen and warehouse. The situation was urgent, and the kitchen deep in the tower of the Prime Minister might not have reacted in time. The cooks and waiters were still preparing lunch for the adults, the baker was still carrying the fragrant freshly baked bread, and the butcher was still cutting meat. She imagined the girl bypassing the crowd, knocking down the baker, and the delicious food spilling all over the floor. There was a lot of shouting and cursing in the kitchen. Even the butcher chased Arya with a meat cleaver to scare her. Arya was quick, she must have escaped at the first moment, leaving the kitchen and passing through the warehouse quickly, no one could stop her. Violet came to the stairs and stopped here. The girl was smart and would consider what to choose. Going up, there would be a closed bridge, and after passing it, you will go directly to the meeting room. Is that a good choice? An ordinary girl would definitely choose to go there, because it is close to the Prime Minister's residence, there are more guards guarding it, and it is relatively safer. But the situation was different at that time. The tower of the Prime Minister was under a full-scale attack. A large number of gold cloaks and Lannister warriors surrounded it, and a brutal massacre was taking place. Is it really safe to run to the meeting hall in the Deadland at this time? A smart girl will choose an unexpected direction. Violet went down the stairs, past the narrow spiral staircase, and finally arrived at a dome cellar of considerable size. This place was used to store beer, and a large number of barrels were piled high. This was also a dead end. The only exit or light source was on the wall, near the dome. Only a thin child like Arya could pass there. She climbed on the wall, used the force to jump up, and stabbed the edge of the dome with her dagger unsheathed. Followed the entrance of the light to confirm where the air vent leads to. What she saw was the square outside, where the Prime Minister's guards usually gathered and the northern guards sparred with each other. When she arrived at the square, at least 4 or 5 people were looking at her, and these people were ordered to eliminate the survivors in the north. She responded to those eyes with cold stares one by one, and soon no one paid attention to her anymore, at least no one dared to stare at her blatantly. The huge wooden door of the square fell to one side. It must have been split by a battle axe. One can imagine how the people inside felt when the door was broken. 2 days ago, this place was full of corpses, mostly from the Stark family. Corpses wearing mail armor, grey cloaks and blood-stained ice wolf flags were mixed in. The wailing, roaring and the sound of weapons clashing seemed to have traveled through time and space and reached her ears. The little girl was very scared. She was just a thin little girl with a wooden sword in her hand. What could she do in such a situation? Where could she go? Violet closed her eyes and counted her heartbeats. When she opened her eyes again, it was already Arya. She saw that apart from the broken wooden door in the courts, there would be no one else walking outside. Everyone hid. Her target might be the bedroom, but definitely not there. The first thing that came to mind should be the stable. She would definitely move along the wall in secret. She shuttled between the house and the high wall, avoiding the murderous warriors from time to time. She also had to be cautious, because if she was attacked by someone, her life would be in danger. Arriving at the stable, she saw corpses and panicked warriors along the way. She would not attract the attention of the warriors. Except for the gray and white robe, the frightened girl was cautious about everything. When she arrived at the stable, it was a mess, with overturned boxes and clothes and sundries torn everywhere. The stable must have been the first place to be attacked. There were more than one corpse on the ground. But when the girl arrived, the attackers must have moved on. There must be living things in the stable, at least the horses are still there. Although it is empty now, all the horses were tied at that time. The horses are very nervous, rolling their eyes, or gnawing or pacing. What the girl would think of and do is to find a horse, put on the saddle, and then run away. The horse is very big for her, and putting on the saddle is not an easy task. She tried many times, and she would fail at first, but she would succeed in the end. Violet noticed the boxes that had been turned over. Among them were women's clothing. It was a pity that the Starks were a step too slow. If they had arrived half a day earlier, at least the unarmed people would have escaped. The valuables had been taken away, and what was left were some rags and inconspicuous things. When Arya came, she must have brought more than that. She might have found some useful things or jewelry that could be exchanged for money. If the little girl was smart, she was really smart, she would have found some clothes that could keep warm instead of those fancy dresses. Following the scenes imagined in her mind, Violet saw the mud and messy footprints on the ground. They belonged to children instead of the more and larger adults around. Two footprints, the slightly larger one belonged to a fat boy, and the other was undoubtedly Arya's. The two footprints were opposite each other. Judging from the order and arrangement, it should be the boy who led the way. The little girl retreated, and then reversed. She saw blood on the ground. Although it had turned into black lines, it was undoubtedly blood. The blood dripped at the boy's feet. Arya didn't know what weapon she had used to drain the boy's blood. She saw the mark left by a body falling to the ground. The boy had fallen, perhaps dead. The little girl stepped back nervously, her shoes stained with the boy's blood. With bloody footprints, the girl slowly stepped back, then she turned and ran in the direction where there should be a pony, and Arya found her horse. Would she ride away on the horse? Violet's conclusion was no. She was very smart, and even if she came to the stable with a confused mind at first, she would soon realize that riding a horse would lead to death. She couldn't leave the city gate at all. Violet found evidence. A set of exquisite little saddles fell to the ground, as if someone had dropped it by mistake. She followed the little girl's footprints and slipped to the other end of the stable. Every step was thrilling. The girl opened the door, opened a crack, and secretly observed the situation outside. There were still sword strikes and screams coming from the Prime Minister's tower. The danger remained. The little girl had two options. The first was to walk down the spiral staircase along the corridor and then through the kitchen again. There was also a barn or something there. That route was not safe, because the Golden Cloak's camp was nearby and she could be attacked at any time. The other route required crossing to the other side of the castle, passing through the Godswood from the river bank, but she first needed to pass through the square, which had become the focus of the Golden Cloaks on the city wall. Chapter 93. Searching for Arya. 2. What would Arya do? Violet thought carefully. She needed to put herself in the girl's shoes and act according to her character. It was such a long distance, and she couldn't just run to the wall. Many people in the gold cloaks knew her, and running would only attract attention. She had to walk, slowly, and calmly. Fortunately, she was dirty and looked like a boy. The gold cloaks and red cloaks had been ordered to find a girl. As long as they didn't attract attention, no one would bother a dirty waif. She tried her best to calm down and move forward slowly. It seemed that she had endless time. She could definitely feel the gold cloak's eyes crawling on her body. There were a few times when the gold cloak seemed to see the clues and stared at her. She must want to run away, and if she really did that, she would be finished. She didn't look up, not because she was afraid of looking into their eyes, but because she was afraid that she would lose her courage if she looked into their eyes. It is conceivable that Arya, who dropped her clothes and cried like a baby, would be caught, and perhaps killed on the spot, or taken to the Queen. However, that did not happen. Arya did it. She strolled leisurely in the square, and even looked back reluctantly. The gold cloaks thought he was a thief or an orphan who took advantage of the chaos in the Prime Minister's tower to pick up the bargain. In normal times, they would definitely scold him, beat the little beggar and throw him out of the city, but that day was different. They had more important things to do. If they could find the escaped little wolf girl, the generous reward might last a lifetime. No one disturbed the little beggar, for fear that any rash action would let the big fish escape. Following the path Arya walked, we arrived at the other end of the square. The shadow of the royal sanctuary covered this place. The temple was always empty. No one wanted to come here for no reason. Being watched, even by the gods, would make people feel uncomfortable. Except for the monks, the most devout believers would stay away from the temple to prevent their sinful side from being seen by the gods. Rows of candles were inserted in candlesticks and arranged on both sides of the aisle. She guessed that Arya would take one or two to illuminate. She had already guessed where the little girl was going next. Following the footprints on the windowsill of the corridor, she climbed out of the temple and found a secluded alley. The footprints were faint, but they did not disappear. There were few people moving around here, and small footprints could be preserved for a long time. Following the little girl's footprints, she went in and out, climbed over the walls, and groped in the cellar. On the way, Violet found the body of a poor woman. Her fatal wound was on her back. A crossbow arrow shot her. Maybe it was the golden robe or the red cloak. Anyway, the murderer let the woman go and let her die in pain. The woman's body became swollen. She closed her eyes regardless of the hideousness and stench of the body. After many twists and turns, she found a secret cellar. Violet followed Arya's footsteps and slid down from a downward sloping window. Judging from the traces on the window, the little girl seemed to run back to the church once before entering. She should have gone to light a candle. As for why Arya knew about this cellar, only God knew. The cellar was dark, but this did not bother Violet. She learned from Arya to use the candles in the church as a light source to walk through the cellar. She raised the candle above her head and tried to extend the candlelight as far as possible. As she walked, multiple shadows on the wall moved together, and each black shadow seemed to be staring at her. A group of giant beasts, or monsters, are more appropriate. Their skeletons looked more hideous under the candlelight. The empty eye sockets of the skeletons stared at her deeply. Will Arya be afraid? This was definitely not her first time here, so she might be afraid, or not, or she might just have to bite the bullet and enter here, regardless of whether she was afraid or not. The skeletons of these giant beasts, their huge empty eyes staring at her, she felt the hunger of the giant beasts. What were they craving for? The jagged fangs cast strange mountains and valleys in the candlelight. She stroked the huge skeleton with her silver palm. The bones were extremely smooth, although her feeling was different from that of ordinary people. She believed that the bones must be cold and hard. She touched a black fang, like a dagger. The skeletons were all dead, but she could feel that something was watching her through the hollow of the skeletons. They hated her and wanted to tear her apart with disgust. Subconsciously, not because of fear, but because she felt the other party's desire to attack, Violet stepped back and touched the fangs of the dry bones behind her. As if to bite off her flesh, the skeleton opened its mouth. She turned around in a hurry, but the sharp teeth still bit her sleeve, tearing off a large piece of cloth with a sharp piercing sound. She shook her head at her immaturity and continued to move forward. In front of her was a larger skeleton with sharp teeth like long swords. She had to jump over the rows of black teeth and pass through the dark throat. Finally, she reached a heavy wooden door with an iron ring. The wooden door creaked open, and there was real darkness in front of her. She closed her eyes and opened them again, adapting to the new darkness. Everything was a blurry gray, and she could only see vague outlines. She placed the candle in front of her and observed the flickering of the flame. The air here was flowing. Although there was a candle, she was like a blind person and could not see the traces left by Arya. She stretched out her hand and began to grope forward. On her side, it seemed to be a rough stone surface. She continued to move forward along the stone, constantly reaching out with her right hand, taking small steps to prevent herself from slipping. After walking for a long time, the wall came to an end. There was a cold wind blowing across her forehead, and even Violet couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. She explored carefully again and confirmed that she was at a well. The well mouth was not small, enough for an adult to enter and exit. The well was 20 feet wide and went straight down. This was a passage for people to go up and down, with protruding stones as stairs. The stairs spiraled down, like a shortcut to the abyss of hell. Violet didn't care about hell, and would rather fight the monsters in the abyss. She didn't even take out her dagger and climb straight down. After climbing for more than 10 feet, she vaguely saw a huge horizontal passage below. She fell from the well mouth and came to a wide passage that could be walked. Although she was the only one here and there seemed to be no need to move in secret, she naturally tried not to make any noise, as if she was scouting in the enemy's territory. Silently, Violet walked a distance in the long corridor. This was a strange passage. Every time she reached the end, there would be a vertical shaft leading to a lower level. There is an ancient legend that there are many secret passages and traps under the Red Castle, so that the royal family can escape from danger at the most critical moment. Although past history shows that the secret passages here have never played a real role, and even the royal family has completely forgotten these passages, whether the secret passages can really lead people to a safe place outside the Red Castle remains to be confirmed. After walking through 2 long stone passages, the following is a dirt road with soft soil and a rotten smell inside. This is simply a tomb passage. The reason for the exploration, she went deep into ancient tombs or deep cellars, and the smell was unforgettable. As she continued to go deeper, the dirt passage finally came to an end, and she had to climb up. Gradually, the rotten smell of the tomb passage was replaced by another stench. Violet came to the city sewer that exuded a stench, and it was already a few hours later. The candle in her hand had long been extinguished. Relying on her extraordinary intuition and sensitivity to the direction of airflow, she groped forward step by step. When she finally came to the clear air under the starry sky and stepped on the hard mud outside King's Landing, it was almost late at night. She was in a mess, her clothes and cloak were all wet, and she smelled bad all over. Her hair was stained with dust, mud and even other more disgusting filth. Finally, she knew that Arya had escaped successfully, but where did she go? Looking around, even if Violet was not emsiphobia, she could not stand her appearance. She couldn't help but smile bitterly and wondered if Joffrey would lose all his love for her if he saw her now. She would definitely not really appear in front of the new king in the state, even if she could not respond to his love. Well, knowing that she is still safe is better than anything else. Violet said to herself, but who will save me? Looking up at the starry sky, Violet felt helpless and lonely. Chapter 94 The Traitor's Daughter 1. Joffrey was very anxious. He repeatedly reminded himself that fear was the most dangerous. Ever since she saved Arya's swordsmanship teacher, the short Baratheon man, Violet had given him swordsmanship instruction. This disappointed Joffrey, not because he thought the Baratheon man's swordsmanship was not good, but because he had less time to spend with her. Violet only told him that she had been looking for Arya for 2 days. King's Landing was not that big, and she should have returned anyway, but she disappeared out of thin air. Joffrey used the power of the new king to order the Gold Cloaks to search for her with all their strength, and finally someone saw her in the royal pool train. He had thought that the bigwigs in the court wanted to harm her, and even suspected his mother. He went to the royal meeting to question her in person, but his mother, Littlefinger and Octopus denied it on the spot, and his mother criticized him for being immature. But he just couldn't let her go. Thinking that Violet might be in the hands of the evil, he wanted to ask people to tear down the Red Castle. In that case, you should come and handle the official business. Don't stay in the bedroom all day and think about it. Help us share some of the burden. Myrcella, who brought the message, imitated her mother's tone perfectly. This was the reason why he appeared in the meeting room. He and Myrcella came to assist. Littleman also wanted to come, but he was sent to the monks to study the scrolls. This is not fair. The fat boy's protesting expression was so cute that he laughed for the first time in 2 days. My dear brother, you can't go. Who told you not to recognize all the words? If you really want to help, you should at least be able to read the scrolls independently. Otherwise, the Imperial Council will have to divide people from the already tense people to serve you, which is not a mess. The brother and sister left in front of the fat boy arrogantly, but hearing the distressed sobbing, it was really funny. The mother sat at the top of the long table, where the father used to sit, and no one would sit there for many years. The table was full of paper and wax clay. When Joffrey and Myrcella entered, they ran into Sansa, who was brought by Sir Bravos. The girl looked haggard, and the redness of her eyes had not yet subsided. Sansa was still beautiful even in her downfall. He didn't know how to face the girl, and deliberately avoided her sight. Even so, he could still feel Sansa pursuing him. I brought this girl. There was no clear title, and Sansa was addressed by gender and age, which showed the embarrassment of her status. The people at the long table were all wearing black mourning clothes. Littlefinger sat on his mother's left hand, Master Pycelle was on the other side of the table, and Viserys, who was covered in powder, was wandering among the people. The mother was wearing a high-collared black silk morning dress, which was embellished with countless dark red gems. The carefully designed clothing style made her look like she was crying blood. Seeing the two of them, the mother smiled gently. You are all big children. There are many things here that you need to listen and learn more, and you will slowly catch up with the pace of the adults. The adults she referred to were the important officials of the court. Then she turned her eyes to Sansa, who was staring at the ground nervously. Sansa, good girl. Her expression was very subtle, and sweet sadness was the best way to describe it. Joffrey was disgusted by his mother's expression, which was too hypocritical. Your request to see me comes every day. I'm sorry, there are too many things to do recently and I can't spare the time. I hope my men didn't let you down. Your Majesty, everyone is very friendly. I thank you for your concern and your busy schedule. Sansa said politely, but also very puzzledly looking at him and the Queen. She was also hypocritical. But Joffrey didn't hate her performance. In this case, the girl had done a good job. Ordinary silly girls would only cry. But no one talked to us or told me what happened. The girl blinked and asked another smart question. Myrcella went to Sansa and took her hand. Calm, strong and beautiful Sansa suddenly looked like she was about to break down and cry. Myrcella quickly let her go and tried to blink at her. The little girl calmed down. We. The mother looked around in confusion, as if looking for someone to explain. Joffrey narrowed his eyes. He realized that his mother had made up her mind about Sansa's arrangement from the beginning. She seemed to want Sansa to stay in the room without knowing anything. Why? Because ignorance is easier to control. The conclusion he came to was disgusting, and he had to hold it back to prevent himself from exploding. It's the steward's daughter, Sir Burroughs replied, looking at Joffrey. Your Majesty sent her here. We don't know what to do with her. His mother frowned and glared at him in reproach. Joffrey almost couldn't help but glare back. Next time, ask first. Her tone was sharp. Who knows what the damn girl said to Sansa? Joffrey's chest rose and fell. He habitually grasped the hilt of the sword, but put it back when he found something wrong. Jenny's still a child, she only knows how to cry. Sansa responded calmly. Good girl, you're smarter than expected, Joffrey couldn't help but admire in his heart. She keeps crying. I want to plead for her. Since she is a child who knows nothing, can she see her father? The ministers lowered their eyes. Joffrey pursed his lips. Is her father okay? The clever girl noticed something. Uncle Wei Young is just a steward, an honest man who can't even use a sword, she said in a trembling voice. Tressailles glanced at the ministers with sharp eyes. I don't want the lovely and innocent Sansa to be frightened. My lords, how should the steward's daughter be settled? Littlefinger leaned forward. I'll arrange it. Can't stay at King's Landing. Tressailles said meaningfully. Her hand expressed a chopping gesture. I will solve it myself. You can't solve anything. Joffrey slapped his hand on the table, papers flew everywhere, and the wax clay box jumped everywhere. Little Joffrey, what are you doing? Tressailles frowned. He bravely faced his mother with a firm look. I saved Jean Poole, and I will take care of her. He glanced at Littlefinger from the corner of his eye. There are already enough girls on the street of Love, and the bodies on both sides of the King's Road have not been cleaned up all year round. I don't want to burden the Sisters of Silence anymore. Sansa's surprised gasp came from beside him. Little Joff, you seem to have misunderstood something. Tressailles wanted to say something, but stopped under his angry gaze. Sir Burroughs, you will escort Jean to the sword dancer's residence. I know how to properly take care of a frightened little girl. The knight looked embarrassed. He looked at Tressailles for help. Sir, I warn you, the King's Guard serves the King, not the Queen or the Queen Mother. If you have any objections to my orders, you can take off this white cloak. There are too many people who want to wear it. As you command. Burroughs bowed and jumped up, taking orders and leaving in high spirits. I don't understand, tears flashed in Sansa's eyes. Sir could have taken Jenny to see Theon directly, why did he go to Violet? She is a good child, she did nothing wrong, she said anxiously. She frightened you, so, Theon is dead. He used his body to block the arrows and swords of the gold cloaks for Jenny. Joffrey interrupted his mother, he could no longer stand her conspiracy and lies. Jenny knew that her father was dead, but she just couldn't accept it for the time being. Leave her alone, she will remember. He frowned, it was not easy to convey the cruel reality to her, but this was the path he chose, and it was what he thought was the right thing to do. Little Joff. Tressailles shouted angrily. Quiet, he didn't want to treat his mother like this, but her behavior was really unbearable for him. He looked at Sansa, I assure you, Jenny will be fine. He turned and nodded to Myrcella, my sister, Myrcella will also visit her and comfort her. He sighed, and patted the chair in front of him under the gaze of his mother and the ministers. Sit down, Sansa, let's talk. Chapter 95 The Traitor's Daughter. 2. The atmosphere at the long table was awkward. Tressailles stared at Joffrey as if she didn't understand. The ministers all had blank expressions. Sansa's expression was a mixture of fear and curiosity. Only Myrcella, blinking her big eyes, stared at him with interest. What are you going to do next? Tressailles' tone was full of contempt. She obviously looked down on Joffrey, who was not yet an adult. But she would be surprised. He was confident. The experience in the Mountains of the Moon made him understand a lot, figured out a lot of things, and strengthened his determination. He made a gesture of I am in charge and turned to Sansa, my good lady. His tone was a little frivolous. For some reason, the first thing he thought of at this time was the style of the little devil. He frowned in his heart, not very satisfied with his performance. You're a good child, well-educated, able to distinguish right from wrong, and have many etiquette to protect yourself. Sansa tilted her head to look at him. There was something in her eyes that he didn't want to face. I don't want to lie to you. He narrowed his eyes and scanned the ministers. Varys twisted his delicate hands like a woman. The State Master was sleepy, and Littlefinger kept staring at Sansa, as if he had forgotten that this was the meeting room. He slapped the table. Lord Baelish, she is my fiancée, please be polite when you look at her. Littlefinger's face was red, and he stared at him viciously. Joffrey felt the malice. My lord, you can come and kill me at any time, just like my uncle dealt with a mad king, or you dealt with Lord Stark. Little Joffrey, what crazy talk were you talking about? The mothers shouted beside him. Joffrey chose to turn a deaf ear to him. He still stared at Littlefinger, but power is power. I now have a stronger power, and killing you is also a matter of time and place. We will not kill people casually. The mother bowed awkwardly to the ministers. Little Joffrey, that's enough. You're tired. You can go back and rest. As soon as she finished speaking, Sir Meryn in a red cloak came forward. Joffrey drew his sword with a smile on his face but no trace of smile in his eyes. He faced Sir Meryn. As a member of the King's Guard, it seems that I no longer have to protect the king. I need to learn more from my uncle. He pointed his sword and focused on Sir Meryn, who looked at Tressalia at a loss. Sir, where are you looking? Your opponent is me, not my mother. Or do you think I'm too weak and can handle it with a blindfold? Enough. Tressalia shouted on his side. Enough is you. He confronted with him. The two of them refused to give in, which made Myrcella suffer. She looked around and didn't know what to do. As a mother, you think about me, but as a queen mother, you don't think about the new king. If you drive me back to the palace like a child here, how will these people look at me in the future? How can I establish my prestige? It's not certain whether any important ministers will be led in a rebellion. He squinted his eyes and scanned the important ministers, and they lowered their heads one by one. His eyes stayed on Sir Meryn. If you still want to continue to work for the Iron Guard, get out of here. The sergeant's face was pale. He looked at Joffrey for a long time, and finally stood up and turned away. Joffrey just glanced at him, and the red cloak disappeared from his sight. Joffrey, who finally had time, focused his eyes on Littlefinger. As a new king, no matter what crimes my fiancé's family has committed, it cannot change the fact that she is my fiancé. You are spying on the future queen. Please don't let people accuse you of this crime, my lord. Littlefinger made a difficult smile. How could it be? I just care about Miss Sansa's current state. She looks very depressed. As Littlefinger bowed deeply, her dark green eyes broke away from his contact. He put his eyes back on Sansa. The little girl was looking at him with an obsessed look. Joffrey sighed. The situation was complicated and he couldn't say what he really thought. He just hoped that Violet wouldn't see what happened today. He had to keep it a secret from Myrcella afterwards. Your Highness. Sansa brought him back to reality with a puzzled expression. Ah. Sorry. He came back to his senses and took the opportunity to cough to sort out his thoughts. I have bad news for you about your father, Lord Stark. I hope you can face it correctly. What news? Sansa's body trembled, and her expression was lovable. Your father betrayed the country. Varys said. Lord Stark once swore to King Robert that he would protect the prince until he came of age, but as soon as that former king died, he immediately summoned us and tried to steal the throne that belonged to Joffrey. While speaking, the old state teacher kept looking at Joffrey and nodded at him, as if to say, I said this for you, please accept my kindness. No, Sansa screamed in response, he would not do such a thing, he is not that kind of person. Tressalia took out a torn letter, most of which was soaked with dry blood. The wax seal on the letter was the direwolf family emblem. Sansa, this was found on the captain of your guard. The recipient is Stannis, and the letter clearly invites him to return to King's Landing to seize the throne. Including our mother, everyone seemed to be well trained, and they spoke one after another, convincingly and conclusively accusing Lord Stark of treason. Joffrey watched coldly, and the scene was very funny. It was obviously an underage girl, but the powerful ministers of the kingdom actually went all out and even lowered their status to unite against her. Please, your majesty, and your majesty, it must be a misunderstanding. Sansa rolled off the chair and fell to the ground pitifully. She knelt down and begged them. Please, ask my father to come over, he will explain it clearly. He is a friend of the king. He is very stubborn and values honor over life and death. He will not do such a thing. Poor Robert must think the same as you. Tressalia replied coldly, fortunately he has left us, otherwise he would be very sad. Her mother's acting skills have reached the level of perfection. Joffrey looked at Myrcella, and both frowned. I'm embarrassed. I know you have nothing to do with this, but she sighed, like the heroine in a stage play, saying in a sad tone, my dear child, you are the daughter of a traitor after all. How can I let you marry Joff? But I love him. Sansa finally cried, her face was confused and scared. Sansa, I know your attitude. Tressalia said in a kind and gentle tone. It is because you love him that you came to see me and told me your father's plan. Joffrey remembered the day when he met Sansa, the day before his father was seriously injured and dying. He suddenly realized how lucky he was. If this girl hadn't leaked the Prime Minister's plan, maybe it would be him and his people who were in prison now, and the ministers would surround Lord Stark and announce his mother and him, even Myrcella and Tormund. He was sweating profusely, and he deeply realized the difficulty of the game of power. He looked at Sansa. The impression of the little girl in front of him changed. She was no longer an innocent, ignorant and lovely girl, but a selfish and self-centered real rebel who was willing to betray her father and the entire family. His eyes could not help but become stern. Sansa looked into his eyes and tears came out. Please, please let me marry Joff. I promise to be a good wife and a queen like you. Then I will let you betray the royal family like you betrayed the Starks. This sentence blurted out. Joffrey really couldn't understand why this girl would be like this. Could it be that she had no guilt at all and only thought about herself? Could such a person really be considered a human being? Joff. A true king should not speak of his lady like this, especially when she is in love with you. The mother's position seemed to be the opposite of what he had just said. Joffrey sighed, accepted his mother's opinion and swallowed the rest of the questioning back into his stomach. My lords. Tressae turned to the ministers. What do you think about her wish? Poor child, she is so foolish. Varys said pretentiously, but her father is ultimately to blame. What can we do? He spread his hands and pretended to be helpless. The children of traitors can inherit the nature of betrayal. She is lovable now, but there's no guarantee that she will not be as treacherous as her father in 10 years. The National Master changed his usual laziness and staggering and reprimanded in a stern tone. HMPH, what an inability to help, and what an admirable rebellious inheritance theory. Joffrey couldn't bear to listen anymore. Lord Varys, you come in and out one sentence at a time, and it seems that you don't offend anyone, and you don't express any attitude. This is why you can often serve in the court. Varys lowered his head. Grand Maester Pycelle, I remember my birth. The Baratheon family was not originally a royal family. They came to power after defeating the Targaryen family. According to your theory, Myrcella, Timon and I are all evil offspring with rebellious hearts. The old state teacher's face changed drastically, and he quickly leaned over and shouted in a trembling voice, Don't dare, don't dare. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novellas. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 96 The Traitor's Daughter 3. I will never betray you, really, I love you. Sansa shouted at the top of her lungs, with an attitude that no words could express, I swear to God that I really love you, my prince. Yes, your majesty. The master finally cheered up, as if he had found a way to restore his dignity in Sansa. It's so sad. Varys continued tenderly, but oaths are not as reliable as blood. The second half of his words were directed to Joffrey, and his voice became quite businesslike. She doesn't look like her father. Littlefinger pointed out, look at her hair and eyes, she is just like Kate when she was young. I understand the source of your strange eyes, my lord, but please pay attention to her identity and your position. Joffrey said unhappily. Littlefinger bowed gracefully and calmly, indicating that he understood very well. Tressae's acting skills continued. She began to worry, or she wanted people to think that she was worrying. Her eyes were kind and gentle. Joffrey swore to the gods in his heart that he had never seen such a kind and gentle mother. Even to him, Myrcella and Timon, his mother had never been like this. Sansa, my dear child, I wish I could believe that you are different from Eddard Stark. Nothing would make me happier than you marrying Joff. You must love him with all your heart. Tressae sighed, I'm afraid Lord Varys and the Master are right. Bloodline is a great influence. I remember that you and your sister both have direwolves. These ferocious beasts are obedient to you. I'm afraid your wildness is no less than that of the wildlings on the ice. I'm different from Arya. Sansa blurted out without thinking, she has the blood of a traitor, but I don't. Ask Septa Morton and you'll understand. I am much more obedient and docile. I just want to be a good wife. Besides, the lady has been sent back to Winterfell. I haven't seen her for a long time. The little girl said this, revealing our longing. Sansa, you shouldn't say that about Arya. Myrcella interrupted and was glared at by Tressae. Joffrey sighed loudly, Sansa, I don't know why you love me. How many times have we met? Do you know my interests and preferences? I don't know your daily habits either. You can never understand a person, let alone loving, just by relying on occasions like banquets, balls, and tournaments, where everyone says polite words. Joffrey stared at her with half pity and half disgust. My dear lady, are you a bird trained to only say what others like to hear? When you blurted out to deny your sister's character, you didn't even hesitate for a moment. Is she really what you said? In your mind, family affection is so indifferent that the blood flowing in your body can be so easily called the blood of a traitor. Sansa looked back at Joffrey in confusion. She seemed to take a longer time to understand what he said. "Little Joffrey, this is not the time to talk about such things, Mom." He turned back angrily and glared at his mother. "Haven't you been discussing my marriage just now? You seem to have forgotten to ask for the opinion of the other very important party in marriage." On the other side, Sansa finally burst into tears. She sobbed and said that she was misunderstood and she was not that kind of person. Myrcella stared at Joffrey with resentment on her face, her expression full of blame. "Don't look at me like that. I'm doing this for both of us." He held Sansa's shoulders and tried his best to make her look at him. "My dear lady, you should understand how little I know about you. When we were traveling, Sigrid taught me that it takes time to understand a person. You can't just look at the surface or rely on words at the moment." He straightened his chest and took a deep breath under Sansa's puzzled gaze. "So I don't really look down on you like that. I just want to remind you that just now, those words were so inappropriate in your position. My dear lady, if we really want to be together, we must understand and explore each other's unknown things that are usually hidden under politeness. If we are sure that these things can be tolerated, or even what we both desire, then love can arise. Although we can get married for the benefit of the family and for politics, please don't talk about love now. Love is not that cheap." The crying stopped. Sansa looked at him in a daze. He turned his gaze to his mother, who also stared at him in disbelief. "There's nothing to see, Mother. This is what I really think." He first found a chair for Myrcella, then pulled his sister to sit down, and then sat down opposite his mother with his arms and legs crossed. "I am not against political marriages, even if there's no love. But for you, my sister, brother, and other relatives, I am willing to give it. But when it comes to love, I am very cautious. I don't believe in the kind of thing that can sprout from just a few meetings." He looked around the long table. The important officials all had their own expressions, but it was difficult to tell what they were thinking. He stared at Sansa, who avoided his gaze uncertainly. "My dear lady, since you have sworn just now, I will believe that you have good intentions towards us." He still stared at Sansa, trying to make her feel the weight of his gaze, and raised his voice to say to everyone at the long table, "In this turbulent time, we all have a lot of things to do, so it's better not to waste time. You lords must have your purpose in calling Sansa here. How about speaking directly? Maybe Sansa can really help." Master Pycelle stroked his beard. "Lord Eddard has 3 sons. They are all underage boys." Littlefinger shrugged. "I am more concerned about the movements of Catelyn and Riverrun." Tressalia grabbed Sansa's slattered palm. "My child, can you write?" Sansa nodded with an inexplicable expression. "I am so happy. Maybe there is still hope for you and Joffrey," she said happily from the bottom of her heart. "Please confirm with the parties involved first, and don't draw conclusions there." Joffrey said helplessly. His mother simply treated him as a decoration. "I need you to write to your mother, and your eldest and younger brothers." "What are their names?" "Robb, Bran, and Rickon." Sansa said, "But Rickon is still a little crabby, he can't read letters yet. Your father's treason will soon spread throughout the 7 kingdoms, I think it's better for you to write to them in person." Tressalia's tone was light, but it made people dare not underestimate it. He doubted whether Sansa really understood the true meaning behind it. But he didn't. I don't know how to write." Joffrey overturned his previous judgment. The little girl was smarter than he thought. She had understood Tressalia's meaning. Would she really write those letters according to Tressalia's instructions? "Good child." Tressalia smiled, as if talking to Myrcella. "Of course I will tell you how to write it. The most important thing is that you urge your mother and your brother to do their best to maintain peace in the country." Her tone turned sharp. "If they refuse to listen, that will be difficult to deal with. For the sake of your family relationship, you should say anything to make them make a wiser choice." Master Pycelle urged on the side. "Lady Stark must be very worried about you." Tressalia said, "Just tell him that she is well taken care of by us and has no worries about food and clothing." She thought for a moment. "Invite them to come to King's Landing to swear allegiance on the day when Joffrey ascends the throne." She smiled warmly at Sansa. "If they all do so, I can be sure that your blood is not contaminated by traitors." Although it was for the sake of the overall situation, Joffrey still felt that what his mother said was disgusting. "When you have your period and can raise a child, I will let Joffrey marry you in the great September of Baelor. May the 7 gods of heaven and the people of the 7 kingdoms bless your union." Sansa's breathing became rapid. She must be tempted. But Joffrey felt uncomfortable, especially since his mother kept mentioning him. Even if there was no treason, he would not want this marriage. Sansa was still a young girl who was naive. He liked more mature women. "Perhaps, if I could meet my father first and talk to him," Sansa suggested cautiously. It was really ironic. When did a daughter need to be so timid when meeting her father? What to talk about? Rebellion. Varys' tone lacked affectation. Sansa, you are so disappointing. Tressa's tone turned sharp. We have already told you about your father's crimes. If you are really loyal to the royal family, why do you still want to meet him? I. Sansa's eyes were filled with tears. Joffrey felt much more comfortable. As expected, you still have feelings for your father. He patted the table to attract the attention of the ministers, but his target of the conversation was still Sansa. They don't let you see Lord Eddard. It's probably because the facts are different from what they said. Joffrey. Tressa scolded him. It should be His Majesty Joffrey. He glared back at her. Why are you still hiding here? In the Game of Thrones, the winner is the king and the loser is the bandit. He looked at Sansa again. Now your father is the loser, so anyone can say something bad about him. What's the point of you talking to him? Go and write the letter. I will arrange for you to live with Myrcella today to prevent some people from having other ideas. He glanced at everyone with ulterior motives, and the ministers bowed their heads to show respect. Chapter 97 The Return of the Little Devil 1. After separating from Joffrey and his men, Bronn, Tyrion, and 300 mountain bandits went to join the Lannister army. Zilla, a member of the Black-Ear tribe who went out for reconnaissance that day, brought back news. According to the campfire calculation, there are 20,000 troops. Zilla's jaw almost dropped when he spoke, a red flag with a golden line on it. Your father. Bronn restrained the urge to laugh at the woman's ignorance. It was not funny to annoy her, and he might lose his ears. It could be Brother Jaime. Tyrion relaxed. From his expression, it can be seen that he is very relieved about his relatives. Anyway, we will know soon. At the same time, Tyrion began to tidy up his clothes, although no matter how he tidied up, he looked like a clown. Who do you prefer? Dad or brother? Bronn asked. Of course it's Jaime. Although he is handsome and the favorite of Dad and sister, at least he treats me kindly. The little devil looked up at him. Don't worry, no matter who it is, Lannister will always reward those who help them, whether they are dwarves or not. To be honest, the dwarf's words did not make Bronn relax. After all the contacts, he found that this man was a real devil. He was smart and had many tricks. If it weren't for the name of the Lannister family and the generosity of the little devil, he would never approach him. Looking at the fate of the Knight of the Valley who dueled with him, he knew how dangerous the dwarf was. Although he himself was not easy to deal with, he thought that compared with a dwarf, his character could be regarded as half a saint. This time, the elite of the mountain bandits came with him, from the Stone Crows, the Moon Men, the Black Ears and the Burning Men. They were different from the ordinary bandits who launched attacks when they entered the mountains. In Bronn's opinion, even with Sigurd, it would be difficult to face these people. The little devil suggested that he was the leader of the mountain people, and with these 300 people as seeds, he would eventually build an army that could capture the area. Gunther was gathering other tribes at this time, and it was believed that this army would be even larger in the future. A group of people had no military discipline and walked in a black mass. These guys wearing animal skins, holding scraps of copper and iron or even branches, looked more like a group of beggars. I hope they will not be mistaken by the Lannister army. I'd better go by myself. The little devil seemed to have the same opinion as him and suggested. Of course it's good for Tywin's son. Wolf of the Moon people said. But Sugar doesn't like it. The two seemed to have coded in advance and said it together, and the meaning was still consistent. Sugar will go with the little man. If the little man lies, Sugar will chop him off and then feed him to the goats. I know. The little devil said weakly. Whenever Bronn saw the little devil being defeated by the barbarians, he felt a refreshing sense of justice being served. This is what is called reasoning but not making sense. Shaga, I swear in the name of Lannister that I will come back. The little devil pointed to the sky and said loudly. I don't believe you. Zira squinted his eyes. She was a short and strong woman, not very feminine, and not curvy, but very shrewd. We have been deceived enough before. Zira, you hurt my heart so much. The little devil showed a pitiful expression, but Dorne thought that this was mostly acting. We are good friends. He immediately changed his face, like a pious monk. Forget it, let's go together. Shaga represents the Stone Crow, Wolf represents the Moon People, and Timot represents the Burning Man. Let's go together. The bandits who were called out kept their distance from each other with caution. The others stay here and wait for news. Then he remembered something. Don't kill each other, understand? After that, the little devil led the horse forward, and Bronn naturally followed behind. This was a smart move. The bandits somehow believed that everyone had a say. If they were asked to sit down and discuss, they would not be able to reach a conclusion until the Lannister army set out, let alone now. Now they had to either follow or wait. They could not afford to waste time discussing. He privately thought that the bandits were not weak in combat, but they were always suppressed by the Veil of Orand. This bad habit had a lot to do with it. The formation of the bandits when they came back showed how loose their alliance was. Sugar of the Stone Crows acted alone, Zira was close to Wolf, and Timot kept a long distance from everyone. The relationships between these tribes were complicated, and the hatred was almost continuous. There was only one thing in common, that is, all tribes were afraid of the Burning People. It was said that the Burning People would roast babies on the fire and like to hurt themselves. Who would approach someone who was extremely cruel to themselves? Timot had almost no friends. Unless necessary, people from other tribes would not even look at him. Bronn didn't care about the mountain bandits, just some wildlings, but he was particularly careful about Timot. In order to prove his bravery and fearlessness to his tribe, this guy gouged out his left eye with a white-hot sharp knife. This behavior was far beyond the limit of the Burning tribe, which was famous for self-mutilation. Most of the ordinary Burning tribe's coming-of-age rites were to cut off a finger or an ear. His behavior was greatly admired by the tribe, and he was immediately elected as the leader. Bronn's point of view was simple. This man was so crazy that he even gouged out his own eyes, so he would not be kind to his enemies. The group left the hill and walked out of the woods. Not far away was a stone watchtower, and the guards were looking down from a high place. Below the crows flying over the canyon was the winding mountain road. The narrowest part of the road was right in the middle of the steep rock wall. There was a temporary low wall there, guarded by more than a dozen crossbowmen. This was the first heavily guarded checkpoint they encountered. The little devil asked the others to pause and let Bronn and the other two forward. Bronn saw more than a dozen crossbows pointed at him, and he couldn't help but feel a headache. At this time, he didn't envy the glory of following Lannister at all. Who was in charge here? The little devil was very cruel. The captain of the garrison was a knight with good armor and a red cloak. He obviously knew the little devil, and hurriedly sent someone to escort the group down the mountain. With the escort of the Lannister warriors, their speed increased a lot, and they saw burnt fields and farmhouses along the way. It didn't take long before they were blocked by a big river, which was the tributary of the Trident, the Green Fork River. The corpses were cleaned up, but the smell of rotten meat along the way was still disgusting. According to Bronn's experience, there had just been a battle here, and many people died. They ran half a grid fast. Not far from the crossroads, behind the defensive offensive formed by rows of sharpened wooden stakes, spearmen and archers formed a solid line of defense, and behind them were continuous camps, extending to the end of the field of vision. It was evening, the soldiers' meal time. There were thin wisps of smoke rising from each tent, and hundreds of them gathered and swirled in the air. When they got closer, they saw little campfires. Although they were not as fierce as the bonfires, they were more numerous, like orange stars falling on the ground. The fully armed soldiers sat in groups of 3 or 2 around the tents, eating or sharpening their weapons. Scarlet flags were flying, and roaring golden lines could be seen everywhere. Even Bronn, who was knowledgeable, couldn't help but swallow his saliva. What a spectacular lineup. Is there really anyone willing to fight such a large army? Are the barbarians in the north crazy? They rode closer, and a team of fully armed cavalry approached with thunderous hoofs. The cavalry were not many in number, only 5, but they made a much louder noise in battle than the little devil, as if thousands of troops were attacking. The thin horses of the mountain bandits had never seen such a battle before, and they kept rolling their eyes or trying their best to escape. There was no other way, the imp could only order the cavalry to stop and wait for them to approach. The leader was a knight, wearing silver armor inlaid with purple crystals and a purple cloak with silver stripes on his shoulders. The emblem on the shield was a snow-white unicorn, and there was a spiral horn on the helmet. Sir Flamant. The imp greeted on horseback. The knight lifted the visor of his helmet. Lord Tyrion. The knight's surprise was beyond words. We thought you had met with an accident. Chapter 98 The Return of the Little Devil. 2. Sir Flamant looked behind the imp in surprise, ignoring Bronn, who was dressed as a mercenary. These comrades behind you. They are my friends and loyal subordinates. The imp said sarcastically, by the way, where is my father? It's been a long time since I've been scolded by him, and I still miss him a little. He used the inn at the entrance as his headquarters. The knight was still worried about the mountain bandits and never took his eyes off them. The imp's eyes met Bronn's, and he rarely smiled bitterly. Maybe this is the justice of the gods in heaven. He greeted the knight. I'll go see him now. I really look forward to the scene of reunion after a long absence. The imp said sarcastically again. As you command. Sir Flamant agreed and immediately ordered the soldiers to raise the barricades. Bronn rode side by side with the imp, and there was a strange feeling, as if the imp was the follower. He looked up at the sky, and couldn't help but imagine that one day he would be surrounded by people and called master. There were 3 rows of barricades in total, and it took a lot of time for the soldiers to move them away. The empty road was only wide enough for 1 person and 1 horse to pass. Bronn was really worried that someone would accidentally fall off the horse and be pierced by the spikes of the barricade. After entering the barricade, he really arrived at the military camp. This is a large area with a depth of more than 10 squares. Zira's estimate is almost the same as the fact. There are 20,000 or even more troops stationed here. Ordinary soldiers camped in the open air, knights used tents, and the tents of real lords were similar to houses. There are many families in the military camp, and different family emblems are particularly eye-catching, including red bull decorations, spotted boar heads, burning trees, and some beasts covered with thorns. Bronn is not a noble young master, and he can't name which nobles so many emblems belong to. He just took a quick look and felt that his eyes were overwhelmed. The little devil is quite popular in the military camp. When they ran past quickly, knights kept greeting the little devil. When ordinary soldiers saw the half-wild man costumes of the mountain bandits, most of them were surprised. Among the bandits, Shaggy's mouth opened the widest. It was obvious that he had never seen so many people and so many weapons. In the military camp, even the spears used by ordinary militiamen were rare and high-quality goods in the eyes of the bandits, not to mention the heavy armor equipped by the knights. The other bandits remained calm on the surface. However, based on his understanding of these people, they were just better at concealing. It seemed that the situation was becoming more and more favorable to the little devil. The more the bandits succumbed to the power of Lannister, the easier they would be manipulated. And the little devil would become more important because of the loyalty of this group of crazy people who didn't care about their lives. The village was destroyed, and most of the houses were left with only rubble and debris. The inn and the nearby stables barely looked like they were before. Although Bronn expected that Lord Tywin would release his anger in some form, he didn't expect it to be so thorough. It seems that the Golden Lines did not care about the fact that these places were actually in a unified land and were protected by the king. Entering the inn, there were no servants to service before, but the majestic red road guards helped to take care of the horses. There was a gallows in the yard, and a corpse was hung there, being pet by crows. The little devil approached the corpse, and the crows flew away with noisy cawing sounds. Only a small part of the corpse remained, and she had lost her eyes, lips and most of her cheeks. The scarlet teeth were exposed, with a strange and hideous smile. "I just asked you for a room and a dinner." The little devil sighed, "And it's not for free, I should have paid." Shaggy was reluctant to hand over the horse to the soldier who was acting as a stable boy. "They won't steal your mare." The little devil assured Shaggy, "They will also feed your horse oats and clean water, and brush her back." Bronn thought that Shaggy's fur vest should be brushed, but he wisely did not say this opinion. "Take good care of Shaggy's horse, the son of Doth." The big bandit roared at the soldier. "If he loses your horse, chop him up and feed it to the goats." The little demon said the rest of the words for Shaggy first. "By the way, you can't find goats here." Under the inn sign, stood 2 fully armed and armored warriors. "Where is my father?" The little demon seemed to know one of them, and greeted him familiarly and asked about the situation. "He's in the hall, sir." The warrior was very polite, just like a knight. Bronn was not sure, maybe this person was a knight. "My people need food and drink." The little demon ordered, "Leave it to you to take care of it." After that, the little demon entered the inn. Bronn was about to get some food and drink, but was dragged in by the little demon. "Come with me, you'll be my captain of the guard from now on." "Let me be frank, I will not call you sir before and after, and I am not your servant." Bronn insisted on this point, although sometimes he felt that this approach was stupid, but for some reason, he was unwilling to really bow to someone. It was the first time that he met the well-known Lord Tywin. He was in his 50s, and just by looking at his physique, one would never imagine that he was close to old age. He was tall, with long legs, broad shoulders, a flat stomach, and solid muscles all over his body, like a natural knight. The Duke of Casterly Rock was bald, and his chin was also bald. The only hair was from his temples to his jaw. His eyes were light green with golden color. You could tell at a glance that he was very smart and difficult to deal with. When the two entered the door, the Duke was drinking with another person. It seemed that the two were relatives, but the Duke was older. Bronn confirmed the Duke's identity at a glance, not because of his appearance but because of his demeanor. The conversation between the little devil and him later confirmed his guess. "Uncle." The little devil bowed to the fat man. "Father, I see you again." Then he bowed to the Duke again. It was really hard to be polite to one's own father. Bronn regretted following him in. He hated etiquette the most, so he found an inconspicuous corner to stay and did not enter the sight of the big shots. Lord Tywin stood up and looked at the little devil up and down. His eyes were not pure. "It seems that the rumors about your death were all rumors." This Tywin was not polite to the little devil. Bronn began to worry about his return. "I'm sorry to disappoint you." The little devil always spoke with sarcasm, even in front of his father. Bronn thought he would restrain himself. "Don't jump up and hug enthusiastically. Watch out for your old waist." Another sarcasm. "If this guy was his son, he would definitely beat him up," Bronn commented beside him. The little devil must care about his father's evaluation of him. He swayed and twisted his deformed short legs to walk to the table, but deliberately took a long way to avoid Tywin's sight. He climbed onto the chair by himself, picked up the bottle on the table and poured himself a glass. "Thank you very much for sending troops to fight for me." "Humph, that's just nonsense. You're the cause of this mess." Tywin frowned his golden eyebrows, looking intimidating without being angry. "If it was your brother Jaime, this inn would be demolished on the spot instead of succumbing to a mere woman. Of course I'm different from my brother." The little devil was very thick-skinned. He raised his head and drank half a cup. He shook his huge head in intoxication. "He's taller than me, if you're willing to notice. It's about the family honor. I can only send troops. People from the Lannister family, even you, are not someone who can be touched by any random person. Those who are targeting us must pay the price. The golden line always rewards." The little devil smiled. "In fact, I didn't bleed, not a drop." The little devil said, "It's a pity that Maurice and Jack, they both died of their injuries in the Vale of Orland. So you need new squires?" asked the man called Uncle by the little devil. "Uncle, there's no need for that. I've found a few myself who are still usable." He pointed at Bronn. Bronn really wanted to kid this guy a few times. He didn't intend to attract attention. He had no choice but to take half a step forward. "Respected lords, I am just a sellsword, working for money. Bronn is a capable sellsword. He helped me get rid of the captain of the guards in the Vale of Orland. I promised him a generous reward and invited him to become my captain of the guards." The little devil tasted the brown ale and seemed to chew something. "How was your war?" He changed the subject. "Your choice is right. The Lannisters always give generous rewards to capable people." The uncle of the little devil nodded to Bronn first, affirmed the little devil's words, and then turned his head. "The war is going well." He turned his head to indicate Bronn's direction to the little devil. Bronn welcomed being invited out. He really wanted to leave this place full of rules, not to mention that he was really hungry. "Don't mind, Bronn is a smart man, and he is tight-lipped enough." The little devil once again made him want to kick someone. But here he had about to show that what the little devil said was right. Chapter 99 The Return of the Little Devil. 3. Edma divided his troops into small teams and stationed them at the borders of the territory. I guess he meant to prevent harassment and raids from our side. We divided our troops into two groups and defeated them one by one before these troops had time to react. "We are simply a bunch of rookies," said the little devil's uncle. "Your brother has won a series of victories," the Duke said to the imp. "He first wiped out the armies of Lord Vance and Lord Piper and Golden Tooth. You can tell how proud Tywin is just by looking at his expression. Then he went to Riverrun for a decisive battle with the main force of House Tully. It was a decisive victory. The lords of the Three Rivers were defeated, and most of Edmund's vassals and knights were captured. Lord Blackwood gathered the remaining troops and fled back to Riverrun, defending it tightly. Your brother is stepping up the siege. Most of the other lords of the Three Rivers around have dispersed and are no longer a concern. Your father and I are eliminating these lords one by one," Bronn recalled carefully, remembering that the speaker should be Sir Kevin, and only this person fits the characteristics of Lord Tywin's confidant and relative. Without Lord Blackwood in charge, Rae Vontre fell immediately. Countess of Riverrun also surrendered Harrenhal. The mountain even burned down the territories of Piper and Bracken. So now we're invincible, and victory is just around the corner. The little devil snorted and went to get the beer again. Unexpectedly, Tywin got there first and moved the bottle just a few feet away. No matter how hard the little devil struggled, he couldn't reach the beer anymore. "That can't be said," Sir Kevin said. "The Lannisters controlled Seaward, and Walder Frey of the Twins is also gathering a large army. Don't consider the Freys." Tywin waved his hand. The old guy is extremely cunning. If he can't see the signs of victory, he will just sit back and do nothing. He poured wine for himself and Sir Kevin under the little devil's big and small eyes. Even Bronn began to be greedy. It must be a bottle of top-grade wine. Jason Mellis doesn't have enough troops to fight alone. If Jaime captures Riverrun, the two families will only rush to surrender. If the Starks and Arryns don't send troops, victory will belong to us. The Arryns are not a concern, but the little devil almost succeeded after his last effort, but his father opened his hand. With a frustrated expression, he gave up completely. "But Winterfell is different. Lord Eddard, Eddard Stark is our hostage, and he is rotting in the dungeon. It is said that he has a leg injury." His little fighting power can be ignored. Dwayne looked disdainful. Although Dwayne didn't say it, he must have believed that the battle had been won. I have intelligence here. His eldest son is summoned the princes, and a large northern army is stationed at Moat Cailin. Sir Kevin frowned and placed a military flag on the long map on the table. Dwayne's face was full of majesty and contempt, which was really confusing. How did he combine these two opposing emotions into the same expression when he fell to the ground? The effectiveness of any sword can only be determined after actual combat. The Duke waved his hand and slapped it heavily on the long map, and the soldiers' flags jumped up. That kid is just a child. When I was his age, I liked the sight of horns and flags flying, but I was far from prepared for the nature of war and the scene of killing. The little devil sat in the chair board, with his legs swinging in the air. The war is in full swing. What is our brave majesty doing? He asked. I'm really curious. How did my beautiful sister persuade Robert to imprison his half-brother? Robert is dead. This simple sentence shocked Bronn, and then he relaxed his brows. Anyway, it was none of his business who was the king. It's your nephew who's in power in King's Landing now. You mean my sister is in power? The little devil couldn't hide his surprise, but then he fell into deep thought. My brave nephew should not be underestimated. Lord Eddard couldn't have been harmed by Jov. It doesn't matter who arrested him. Dwayne shook the brown beer in the glass meaningfully. I would like to ask you for help. Market Piper and Carl Vance are sneaking around on our supply lines, and even attacked the manor on the other side of the Tea River. The little devil smacked his lips. They're just a few little troublemakers. If it were in the past, I would naturally be eager to use their heads to win military merit for myself. A mischievous smile appeared on his face. Now, it seems a bit of a waste of talent for me to deal with these little troublemakers. Oh, Dwayne's face was calm. If you have a bigger appetite, you can help deal with the other two heroes. Of course, it would be more appropriate to call them remnants. They specialize in harassing the grain-collecting troops and are very annoying. One is the conceited young Master Britt Dondarry, and the other is a pagan, the Red Monk. Dwayne's eyes were blazing with anger as he spoke. It was obvious that the trouble these two people caused him was far more than what he heard. If you can use half of your ability to escape and deal with them for me, I will consider valuing you more. Of course, the premise is that you don't make any trouble. The little devil wiped his mouth with his hand, as if wiping off the saliva. My dear father, I am really touched that you can trust me so much. From his tone, it is clear that he does not really think so. Whether he is touched or not is not necessary to discuss. Are you sure you can assign people to me? How many? 5 or 10? He showed a disgusting smile, and his laughter gave Bronn goosebumps. Anyway, it doesn't matter how many. If I accidentally run into Thoros and Lord Lyric, I will beat their asses. He moved his eyes to the side board beside the table, found something, jumped off the chair, and walked over to Wit. A plate of white cheese and fruit. Unfortunately, I still have a promise to fulfill. This time he successfully got the food and drink. While cutting the cheese, he threw an apple to Bronn. I need 3,000 helmets and 3,000 sets of mail, as well as swords, spears, spearheads, war hammers, battle axes, iron gloves, neck guards, knee guards, elbow guards, and don't forget the breastplate. And I need my father to allocate a certain number of carriages to transport these things. The door behind the little devil burst open. The red-cloaked warrior flew across the room and crashed into the fireplace. Fortunately, the fireplace was not burning at this time, and the mighty lion helmet tilted to one side. Sir Kevin jumped up with a curse and drew his longsword. Shaga rushed in. The first thing he did was to break the warrior's longsword with his knee. After dropping the broken sword, he swaggered in. Before the people arrived, the choking smell had already arrived, which was even more pungent in the room. Little devil. His roar even shook the beams of the house, and dust fell down. If you dare to draw your sword in front of me again, I will chop you up and feed you to the goats. What? Can't find any goats, so you let them go. The little devil quickly recovered from his shock and asked while chewing cheese. Are the mountain bandits filing? Bronn watched the shoal easily on the side, and he began to find it funny. Who are you? Lord Dwayne's expression was serious and his tone was cold as ice. Father, they are my loyal soldiers. They saved me from the crazy woman in the Eyrie. The little devil explained, I want them to stay and help. Don't worry, they don't eat much. Unfortunately, no one appreciated his humor at this time. Bronn wanted to clap his hands, but angrily found that he was standing too far away. Barbarian, what are you doing here? A military meeting is being held here. Sir Kevin asked loudly. Flatlanders, don't look down on us. We are free men, and free men have the right to participate in any war meeting. Khan spoke first, not afraid of the gorgeous clothes of the people in front of him. We want to see the Lion Chieftain. Zira was finally a sensible person and changed the subject in time. Otherwise, Bronn was really afraid that their freeman speech would continue. There are two old men here, and I can't tell them apart. Tymett announced loudly. Maybe he is the only one in the Seven Kingdoms who dares to call Tywin an old man, Bronn thought in his heart. Sir Kevan was about to draw his sword, but was stopped by Lord Tywin. Tyrion, my child, where is your usual courtesy? Come and introduce the distinguished guests. Bronn almost spit out the apple in his mouth. He began to understand that the little devil was still Tywin's son after all. He probably couldn't get close to their skills in changing faces and their eloquence in his life. Chapter 100 The Little Devil Returns. 4. The little devil was indeed the father of Tywin, and his expression was serious, as if he had indeed forgotten the etiquette just now. He licked his fingers, of course. He first pointed to Zira to Tywin. This beautiful girl is Zira, the daughter of Zik of the Black Ears. I'm not a girl. Zira replied in a sharp and unpleasant voice, I like to cut off people's ears. I already have a collection of 50. I hope you will continue to work hard and double your collection soon. The little devil said lightly. He swayed away from Zira. This is Khan, the son of Korrit, handsome and romantic, the most beautiful man in the Moon Mountains. Then he patted Shagga's thigh. Bronn thought that the little devil wanted to pat Shagga's shoulder, but unfortunately he couldn't reach it, so he had to do this as a last resort, and this giant is Shagga, and the two of them are heroes of the Stone Crows. The two people from the Stone Crows were very pleased with the little devil's description and nodded with satisfaction. Shagga was particularly bulging his muscles. The imp came to the other side without stopping. Here is Ulf, son of Ul, of the Moon People. And the Red Hand of the Burning People, the leader, Tymett, son of Tymett. He turned around and pointed at Bronn. You have already seen this sellsword. He is highly skilled in martial arts and has a personality that matches yours. In just 2 months, he has defected many times. He is a rare talent. Bronn saluted Tywin again. He did not think that the imp was being sarcastic. In fact, he was very proud of his many defections. As the saying goes, one should adapt to the wind and stand at the forefront. Then the imp straightened his chest, like a great artist showing his life's work, and introduced loudly in a voice that did not belong to the MC of the temple, let me introduce my father, Tywin, son of Titars, the Duke of Casterly Rock, the Warden of the West, the Shield of Lannisport, and the eternal hand of the King. Duke Tywin bowed slightly, and his momentum and majesty were truly worthy of the name. Even though I'm in the western border of the Seven Kingdoms, I often hear about the heroic deeds of the tribes in the Mountains of the Moon. The Duke's words here are extremely exaggerated, but not too abrupt. Bronn thinks that there's no better way to tell a lie than this. My lords, I'm curious about what blew you from your fortress here. We rode here on horses. Shagga scratched his head, his embarrassment obvious. He promised to give us clothes and weapons. Tymett also answered cautiously, which was rare. The little devil seemed to have more to say but was interrupted. The messenger knelt on one knee while glancing at the mountain bandits with strange eyes. Your Excellency, his expression was serious and his eyes were anxious. Sir Adam sent me to report to you that the Stark army is moving south along the riverbank. Lord Tywin looked serious, so the little wolf has moved. He clapped his hands together, seeming very happy, but there was absolutely no sign of excitement in his expression. Very good. You go back and tell Sir Adam to retreat immediately and not fight with the Northerners before the main force arrives, but he can send people to harass the opponent's flanks, mainly to anger the Northerners. As you ordered. The messenger saluted and ran away, and within 2 breaths, the sound of horse hooves was heard in the distance. I suggest we meet the enemy here. Sir Kevan didn't care that the mountain man was still in the room, and hurried to the long mat to observe carefully. The terrain here is the best. There is a shallow beach next to it, and there are traps and stakes. If we led the kid here, we might scare the little guy away. Tywin replied, the kid may not be very magnanimous, and I didn't overestimate his courage. If he escapes back to Moat Cailin, we can't do anything about him for the time being. Lord Tywin's eyes were sharp, and the atmosphere in the room became tense because of him. The bandits were at a loss and fidgeted. Order the drummer to beat the assembly order. Send someone to inform Jaime and tell him that we will advance immediately and fight a decisive battle with Robb Stark. Yes, sir. Sir Kevan bowed and left quickly like an ordinary messenger. Looking at his fat body, it is really hard to guess that he can move so quickly. I heard that the warriors of the mountain tribes are all brave and fearless of danger. Tywin said. Of course. Khan replied. Women are just as brave, Zira added hastily. Come with me. Tywin's voice was full of sincere emotion. Bronn was watching a magic show, and even the apple core fell to the ground. He had planned to eat it together. I promise that my son's promise can be fulfilled, and I can give you more. The old man narrowed his eyes, and a gleam of light flashed. "We don't know if you will keep your promise," Wolf said. "Besides, we already have your son's promise. Why do we need yours?" Bronn didn't know how it would develop next, but according to his intuition, the mountain bandits were falling into Tywin's trap. "Of course, you don't have to join me." Tywin spread his hands and put on an indifferent attitude. "After all, the people of the north are made of black ice. When they meet them, even my bravest and most skilled knights will be afraid. You don't have to be ashamed to move forward." Although Lord Tywin didn't smile, he did his best in his sarcastic and even provocative expressions. What a trip to provoke. Although the bandits appear to be smart, they are actually country bumpkins. If they could keep their composure after being provoked like this, they would not have stayed in the Moon Mountains long ago. The Burning Tribe is fearless. Time it will fight with lions. This guy was the first to speak. Where the Burning Tribe has been, the Stone Crows must have been waiting in front. Khan's face was flushed, as if he was ashamed of falling behind the Burning Tribe. "We will go too. Shaggy will chop up all the northerners and feed them to the crows." Shaggy seemed to realize that there were no goats here. Feeding the crows might be the result of his racking his brains. Bronn would not be provoked. He rolled his eyes and thought about boring things. "Chief Lion, Zira will go with you." Zira was the smartest among the bandits, and she was not easy to deal with. "But your half-man son will also go with us. He promised to exchange his life for weapons. Before we get the weapons, his life will temporarily belong to us." Tywin glanced at the little devil with his golden pupils. "Of course, Lannister always keeps his promises, and your request is very reasonable." Bronn accidentally fell off the table he was sitting on. He saw through the position of the little devil in Tywin's heart. This noble father seemed to want his son to die gloriously in battle. "I am very happy." The little devil's tone was bitter. Lord Tywin set up a domineering long table on the hill overlooking the King's Road, covered with a golden tablecloth, and his big tent was placed next to the table. The red flag of the roaring golden lion fluttered on the long pole, and he himself had dinner at the long table with his lords and knights. Bronn escorted the little devil to attend this dinner. He was extremely reluctant to do this job. The main reason was not because of etiquette or other trivial matters, but because the adults were feasting on delicacies from the mountains and the sea, and he had to stand aside and watch, which was really a torture. The little devil seemed to be tired, and he staggered up the hillside, slower and more staggering than before. When the two arrived, the cook was serving the main course, 5 roasted golden and crispy suckling pigs. Because the pigs had different fruits in their mouths, the aroma of meat and fruit was elegant, and people would drool just by smelling it. "Sorry, I'm late." The little devil squeezed his uncle's side at the table under Bronn's envious gaze. "Tyrion, I think it's more appropriate for you to deal with the dead." Lord Tywin was intimidating without anger. "If you are so slow on the battlefield, the battle will be over when you arrive." "Ha, father, why are you in such a hurry? Ask the adults to leave 1 or 2 peasants for me, I'm begging you." The little devil's joke caused laughter among the princes. It turns out that the little devil is quite popular among the lords of the West. Bronn used distraction to fight against the constant secretion of saliva. He swore in his heart that he would never attend the dinner party at the Shredder again. "Of course, there is no need to leave too much. I have always been content." The little devil poured himself a glass of wine while waiting for the servants to cut the pork. Seeing his impatient look, he must have been impatient. Bronn's stomach growled. He was shameless and didn't care about the eyes of other servants around him. The crispy pork skin crackled under the knife, and the fragrant hot oil flowed all over the tray. Bronn couldn't help swallowing a saliva, but he didn't expect that Lord Tywin would talk about business at this time. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.